in the mid-20s for many areas across central and southern areas, in the high teens, low 20s further north than that. Through this evening, those showers across the southeast where they do form should push away, and then we look to the north where low pressure is still dominating, quite a brisk westerly breeze affecting coastal areas and the high ground of Scotland. Some outbreaks of rain, relatively light through this evening. Should be a dry end to the day across Northern Ireland, Northern England, parts of Wales, central areas too. You'll see temperatures still in the mid-20s, so it will still feel quite warm out there to end this week of exceptional heat. And then overnight, clear skies for many areas. We've still got quite warm air with us, so it's still going to be a fairly warm night, though certainly cooler than it has been lately. So that may bring some relief if you've been struggling to sleep throughout this week. Temperatures by tomorrow morning, just 11 or 12 degrees for many of us. Some areas seeing single figures to start the day, which could be the first time in a little while. Now, this band of rain pushes into parts of Northern Ireland, much of Scotland throughout Saturday. As we look further east, it looks much drier through the day, so plenty of sunny and warm weather to come through Saturday across parts of England and Wales predominantly. We'll feel warm in that sunshine still, not quite as warm as it has been, but still highs of 28 in the southeast and in the 20s elsewhere, so perhaps a little bit more pleasant. Bye-bye.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Boxed Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Thank you, Britain, for making GB News Radio such a huge success. Whether you're in the car, on the go, or listening at home, thank you for choosing us as your radio station.
Good morning, this is the latest AI travel news from GBnews.com. On the M4, both directions between junction 42 at Earlswood and junction 40 at Tybuck have 3 lanes restricted southbound due to ongoing work. In Hampshire, the A303 westbound is partially blocked between junctions with the A342 and the A338 because of a broken down vehicle, with 1 lane closed. Normal traffic flow should resume around 9:15 this morning. And on the trains, Cross Country is running a reduced service between Cardiff Central and Nottingham. London Overground trains are not running between Gospel Oak and Woodgrange Park, with a reduced service operating between Richmond and Stratford. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Bold. They are under no illusion.
Ray.
Are you a human trafficker?
Boundless. I've had enough of the nonsense, and I'm not afraid to say it.
Don't get this on the BBC.
Every weeknight, I tear through the headlines.
The smell of gasoline. Should we be worried about it?
From Westminster madness to cultural war chaos.
What I'm going to do now, they are throwing things out the car as we speak.
Get ready, Britain. Here we go. Patrick Christie tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Westminster, the ultimate clique.
And you're fighting like rats in a sack.
But here on the Camilla Tominey Show, we ask the questions the establishment media is too scared to ask.
OK, let me ask you a straight question, because I know you're a straight-talking politician.
Whether it's net zero, illegal immigration or law and order, nothing is off limits.
You had the power then.
Yeah, as I
and
say,
now you've lost it.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show that's fearless.
But no, let me finish my question if you don't mind, because it is my show.
Sundays at 9:30, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world. Am I allowed to talk then? No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
More and more people are now tuning in to GB News.
They shape our programmes, we try and incorporate them in our shows as much as we can.
Our audience are really interactive.
Our listeners, our viewers, they're growing.
And that's because they tell their friends and family about what we're doing here at GB News.
It feels like the depth of that connection has strengthened as well.
Thank you so much for speaking to us on GB News.
Come and say hello to everybody that's here from GB News.
It's been an exceptional event.
We've come a long way here now.
Thank you, GB News!
What's so unique about GB News viewers is that they really, really love our country.
And they talk about us so proudly. We're on a journey together.
We are here for all of Britain. We believe in this country, we believe in its people, and we believe in all of the communities who live here.
That's what makes us the fearless champion of Britain.
Good morning, it's 9:30 on Friday the 29th of May, live across the United Kingdom. This is Britain's Newsroom with Charlie Peters and Miriam Cates.
Well, is the murder of Henry Novak the most clear example yet of two-tier policing?
I'm sorry that he was handcuffed and arrested in the moments before he lost consciousness.
Well, the police handcuffed 18-year-old student who was a stab victim after false claims of racism before he died. Well, Reform UK's Robert Jenrick wants the murder to be treated in the same way as George Floyd's was, and Mr. Jenrick joins us soon.
Well, here at Southampton Central Police Station, all eyes are on officers following yesterday's verdicts. Questions will be asked. Will they be releasing body cam footage from that night?
Elsewhere, Jewish talk has been axed. The British Museum postpones a Jewish lecture over fears that protesters might disrupt the event. This is as Dame Helen Mirren is accosted on the street by a pro-Palestine activist.
And there's Helen Mirren, the avowed Zionist. She said Israel should last forever because of the Holocaust. And she was very happy.
Elsewhere, Sturgeon speaks out. The former First Minister says that she is living through probably the worst week of her life after her estranged husband embezzled over £400,000 from the SNP.
We are finalising the investment plan. That sits with the Strategic Defence Review.
Where is the Defence Investment Plan? That's the question from the Conservatives this morning.
This is, I think a real sobering report, and we cannot afford, we will not allow a lost generation.
Well, there are concerns about youth employment. Ministers have launched a major push to get young people working with 300,000 new placements on offer.
And more on those Mandelson messages. Cabinet ministers reportedly try to hide their text exchanges with Peter Mandelson from Parliament.
There's been a huge rocket inferno because a Blue Origin rocket has exploded on the launch pad in Florida, with Jeff Bezos' company calling it an anomaly.
Cars have to go more slowly. There's also fewer parking spots for cars, so that they can't open their doors in the cyclist's face, and there's fewer blind spots as well.
Well, England's first ever cycle street has just opened in Cambridge, where cyclists take priority over cars. We'll have the latest.
Well, so much reaction continuing to pour in after that guilty verdict yesterday in Southampton with regards to the shocking murder of Henry Novak. I expect we will see this one, Miriam, run on and on, because serious questions are going to continue to be asked of the police and body cam footage. That's the key one, isn't it? When will they release it? Is it the family? Are they going to have to come out and request that that goes public? We do see the police releasing lots of footage, but perhaps only when it puts them in a good light.
And as Robert Jenrick has pointed out, lots of politicians haven't commented on this case, which is very unusual. Usually, political leaders are very quick to express their sympathies or their criticisms. Silence from some quarters on this.
Yeah, lots of input from senior politicians, often on issues that are completely unrelated to the United Kingdom. Who can forget Sir Keir Starmer taking the knee with regards to George Floyd, but nothing to say when a false accusation of racism is used for a man to be cuffed as he stood there dying from 5 stabbing wounds. Really shocking stuff. But look, there's so much to get into today. There will be some positive coverage. We've got some interesting stories to bring you. It's not all just misery this morning on Britain's Newsroom. So please do get in touch. gbnews.com/yoursay.
But first, here's your 60-second news update with Tatiana Sanchez.
Thank you and good morning. The top stories. The US and Iran still need to work out several sticking points before an agreement on the war can be reached, Vice President J.D. Vance has said. The deal would reportedly extend the ceasefire for 60 days and launch talks on the future of Iran's nuclear program. 2 people have been charged after a 30-year-old woman, Shanice Brooks, was shot dead outside the 141 bar in Sheffield city centre in the early hours of Monday morning. An AI facial recognition tool that aims to detect adult migrants posing as children will be deployed at the UK's borders next year. The Home Office saying the technology will make it easier to identify adult migrants attempting to game the system. And a Canadian man accused of selling lethal substances linked to the deaths of more than 100 British people will not face justice in the UK. 60-year-old Kenneth Law is due to appear in court in Ontario later today. Those are the latest headlines for now. More in half an hour.
Tune in to GB News Radio wherever you are. Online, on DAB Digital Radio, on TuneIn, on Radio Player, on Nation Player and on your smart speaker. Just say, play GB News.
Hello, good morning and welcome. You're watching and listening to Britain's Newsroom. We're live across the United Kingdom on GB News with Charlie Peters and Miriam Cates.
Now, MPs have condemned police for handcuffing a dying teenager who was falsely accused of racism by his murderer in what in court was described as a wicked lie.
Well, the policing minister, Sarah Jones, has said this is a truly horrific case. All our thoughts are with Henry's family and friends and what they're going through.
But no response has been provided, nor has there been a condemnation about this case from the Prime Minister, nor the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood.
Now, officers have since apologised after it was found that 18-year-old Henry Novak was stabbed 5 times in Southampton last December by 23-year-old Vikram Digwa. Take a listen to this.
I'm sorry that Henry's life couldn't be saved that night, and I'm sorry that he was handcuffed and arrested in the moments before he lost consciousness. When his killer made that call to police, and he called the police, not the ambulance service, he lied on that call. He lied when police attended the scene. He continued to lie as Henry's condition deteriorated. It is clear, and it is absolutely tragic, that it took them 3 minutes before they started to administer first aid. It is important, though, to say the pathologist has been clear. There's nothing officers could have done which would have saved Henry's life.
Now, the murderer used a Kirpan ceremonial knife and was filmed telling his victim, "I am a bad man," moments before the fatal attack. Well, our reporter Isabel Fekulak joins us now live from Southampton. Isabel, there is going to be an IOPC investigation into the conduct of the constabulary in this case. What's the sort of timeline we can expect on that?
Well, good morning to both Charlie and Miriam. Yes, I'm here outside Southampton Central Station. Last night there was a relatively small protest outside the station here. I'm seeing some remnants of it. In fact, if I look to the right, lodged into a tree, I can see a photo of Henry Novak on a sign that says "No justice, no peace." And I suspect that throughout the course of this investigation and even afterwards, there will be more demonstrations like this one. Of course, there are many questions for the police. One main question is, of course, to do with that body cam footage to see exactly what happened when officers arrived at the scene. Now, the release of that footage will largely be up to the Novak family. The footage would be very distressing, so it will be up to them to decide whether they want that in the public domain. Other questions, of course, launched to the police is how they did not treat Henry Novak's condition more seriously sooner. It took them 3 minutes to administer first aid on that night on December 3rd last year, and it took them that long despite Henry Novak being heard in transcripts saying, "I can't breathe and I am dying." So questions for the police. They will be arriving at work today, very much business as usual, but all eyes will be on Hampshire and Isle of Wight police as this investigation is ongoing.
Isabel Fekulak, thank you so much for that report. Well, Reform UK's Treasury spokesman Robert Jenrick joins us now in the studio. Good morning, Robert. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
Now, you've written in the Telegraph today about this horrific case, and you're comparing it to the George Floyd murder and saying actually we should be just as outraged by the police response as the Americans and, in fact, the world were back then.
Well, I find it astonishing that we had the Prime Minister taking the knee with Angela Rayner about an incident that happened in another country, and yet with this one, there's nothing from the Prime Minister, nothing from the Home Secretary, and as far as I'm aware, other than the local Member of Parliament, I'm the only MP even to have raised this in the House of Commons. Look, nothing that we say or do now will bring back Henry Nowak, and his family and friends are no doubt now, you know, their lives will be changed forever. They've lost this bright young man whose life has been extinguished by this murderer. But very important questions arise from this. Why did the police take the word of this man, who ultimately was the killer, and arrest, handcuff someone who was dying and not prioritise first aid, trying to save this man's life, even if that was in vain because the stab wounds were so severe? What is the training for police officers like those at Hampshire Constabulary? You know, how far has anti-racism training and dogma been taken so that officers take the word of someone like this over the facts and being objective at the scene of a crime? And I worry that the squeamishness that we're seeing from the police and certainly from politicians is when there's a case like this where it is an ethnic minority who is the offending party and it is a white person who is ultimately the victim. And in these cases, people are just not willing to talk about them. They're not willing to put their head above the parapet, unlike in George Floyd and countless other examples.
Now, Robert, obviously this is not an isolated case. There are many other examples where the authorities have shied away from prosecuting the facts because of this sort of fear. We know about it with Valdo Callacane in Nottingham. We know about it with the Abedi brothers in Manchester. We know about it also with Axel Rudakabana not wanting to see him as a black boy with a knife. I know you're posing this in terms of asking questions about this case, but do you think there are actions we can take now as a society to overturn some of this anti-racist dogma, as you've put it, in wider society and in policing in particular?
Yes. Well, you're absolutely right. There is mounting evidence from those cases and others of two-tier policing. And that is what I'm most worried about, because it is incredibly corrosive to public trust in the police and the rule of law more generally. And when the police and our political class are so squeamish about instances which are involving ethnic minorities as the offenders, that they're willing to overlook crimes against white people, that is a very dark path. As you know from the grooming gangs, that was at the heart of the problem, why so many people didn't take action there. I think we've got to review the training that the police have. As I say, the anti-racism training, I think, is indoctrinating decent people who are going into the police force and encouraging them to make bad calls like this. We want them to be acting on the facts, not on perceptions. And then when these instances happen, they should be being investigated properly. And it's completely wrong for both the police, you know, just to issue an apology months and months after the event, and for no senior politician, certainly nobody in the government, to step up and talk about this case for fear, no doubt, of ethnic minority groups, so-called anti-racism campaigners criticising them.
But, Robert, this anti-racism dogma, as you call it, goes back a long way, as far as the Macpherson report, really, after the inquiry into the death of Stephen Lawrence. That's a lot of undoing to be done. And critics will say, well, you were part of the last government that allowed this diversity and inclusion drive, the changing of the culture within the police and other institutions, to occur. Why didn't the last Conservative government nip this in the bud?
Well, you're right. It goes back a very long way. And successive politicians, and as you say, I was part of that government, so I guess, although I was never a minister responsible for this, I must take my share of responsibility, have been fearful of tackling these issues. You know, somebody who was very senior in the last Conservative said to me the other day that they were scared of being cancelled by raising issues like this. Well, I'm afraid that's...
Well, that's the same fear that the police had.
That is pathetic weakness by politicians and by the police that has to change. And this case, like the others that we just heard about from Charlie, should be a moment in which the country changes course.
Robert, you're talking about two-tier justice. Let me give you a clear example, I think, in this case, that many people are sort of becoming aware of now that they hadn't before. The kirpan, it's a ceremonial knife. It's a dagger that Sikhs are permitted to carry in public. Indeed, in Wembley Stadium, I certainly couldn't turn up with a razor, should I want to have a shave at half-time. But Sikhs are allowed to go into the stadium with a 5-inch blade. Do you think the law should change now to get rid of that differing appreciation into who can carry a blade and a dagger?
Well, first, it's worth saying, in this case, the killer was actually carrying 2 knives.
Of course.
One was a shorter ceremonial dagger. The other was a much longer blade. And the actual blade that was used to kill Henry Nowak was a 21-centimetre blade, which may not have been eligible for the limited exception that there is under the law for religious swords and daggers. But to answer your question directly, I do think the law should change. Is there a place on our streets for swords and daggers? No. Yeah. And should people be treated differently depending on their faith? No.
So reform would change that law then? That's a...
It would do. It's something that our Home Affairs spokesperson, Zia Youssef, is going to look at. But we believe in equality before the law. We should all be treated equally. And that means that, you and I should be treated exactly the same as somebody who is a Sikh, a Hindu or a Muslim. And you should not be having dangerous weapons out on the streets under this limited exemption under the law.
Robert, you mentioned Zia Youssef. There's been a very public Twitter spat between the two of you, or disagreement at least, this week. Many people are asking a question, what's going on at the top of reform? Do you agree on all these policies, or are you having your arguments in public?
Well, there hasn't been a disagreement because I've said absolutely nothing. And the first rule in reform is that you have your disagreements in private, and I think that's a very sensible one, and a lot of other political parties could learn a lot from that.
Well, early this morning, Robert, former Detective Chief Superintendent for the Met Police, Kevin Hurley, had this to say to GB News. Let's take a listen.
And, of course, your initial reaction is, I need to get control of this situation to protect myself against being assaulted, stop the suspect, as we know it, running away. So it's not unnatural and probably quite reasonable for what they knew to grab hold of the first one they think is the suspect, that they've been told twice is the suspect, including by their own control room.
Well, Robert, that's the defence you've heard from Kevin Hurley. He doesn't suffer fools gladly. That's a veteran of the parachute regiment and the police in serious frontline roles. What do you make of that defence of the police he's provided?
Well, release the body-worn camera then. That's what I've been calling for. If the family of Henry Nowak are willing for that to happen, and it's important, I think, that they are consulted, then let's release it. And then we have transparency. We can see exactly what happened in this case. But the facts, as I understand it, are the police turned up and said, of course, it was a chaotic situation. The killer's brother had lied and there'd been this false accusation of racial abuse. So it wasn't a simple situation, but the officers chose to prioritise that accusation of racial abuse over saving the life of this young man. And he had been stabbed 5 or 6 times. He was dying before them in a pool of his own blood, and they chose to handcuff him. I think that was a terrible mistake.
Just before we move on quickly, Robert Jenrick, you're making this comparison with the case of George Floyd. What will you say to those who say that's an insensitive comparison to see the differing reactions between those two cases?
Well, I'm just making the point that here is someone who is a young white boy who is falsely accused of racism and then dies in this most appalling way. And yet almost everyone in our political and media establishment turns a blind eye to it. The Prime Minister says absolutely nothing. The Home Secretary says absolutely nothing. A junior minister in the Home Office is eventually coaxed to put out a few warm words for the newspapers. And yet, when there was an incident in another country that ostensibly has nothing to do with the United Kingdom, you've got the Prime Minister and the former Deputy Prime Minister taking the knee in their office. There were debates in Parliament. There was a minute's silence in the House of Commons. What are the priorities of Parliament and this government? I care about British people, and I want to root out anti-white racism, just as I want to root out racism more generally.
OK, Robert Jenrick, Reform UK's Treasury spokesman, thank you very much for your time this morning.
Now, the Sikh community have responded, saying, on behalf of Sikh organisations and communities across the country, we express our deepest condolences for the tragic loss of life, and our thoughts and prayers remain with the Novak family and loved ones during this profoundly difficult time.
This incident, as reported, does not align with the Sikh faith, the Sikh community, nor the principles it stands for. We've also got a statement from the Crime and Policing Minister, Sarah Jones, who had this to say.
This is a truly horrific case, and my thoughts are with Henry's family and friends. No verdict can undo the pain they are living with, but I hope today brings some small measure of justice.
It is right that an IOPC investigation has been launched into the actions of the police to get to the truth.
And a spokesman for the Independent Office for Police Conduct said,
our investigation, which began following a mandatory referral from the force that we'd received the same day, remains ongoing, and the officers involved are currently being treated as witnesses.
Well, we also have a statement from Zia Youssef. Well, we referred to the tweet that Zia Youssef put out earlier in the week in response to Robert's answer on a different programme, which said, as the person responsible for our deportation plan, I want to ensure people know where we stand. If a foreign national lives in a social housing at taxpayer expense, they automatically fail our economic test and will be deported.
And lots of you will have much to say on this case, of course. gbnews.com/your say. Particularly interested to hear your reaction to that defence of the police from Kevin Hurley, that retired officer. Is that sort of cops rallying together, supporting each other? Do you think, as Robert Jenrick says, we need to release the footage? And also, a bit of a breaking line there from Robert Jenrick saying that Reform UK would ban the Kirpan. They've not said that before, so that's a new policy from Reform UK, saying that they would take steps to ban that ceremonial dagger. What do you make of that? Is that currently two-tier justice? Get in touch, gbnews.com/your say.
We'll keep our eyes on Twitter to see what they make of that as well. Well, moving on, the British actress Dame Helen Mirren was harassed by a pro-Palestine activist as she walked down the street in London with her husband in a resurfaced clip. Let's take a look.
There's Helen Mirren, the avowed Zionist, said Israel should last forever because of the Holocaust. And she was very happy the Palestinian gone. You put the post up, you evil old bag. You're an evil Zionist and you as well.
Well, Dame Helen has long been an outspoken supporter of Israel, has previously criticised boycotts of the country.
Well, the clip re-emerged on the same day as the British Museum postponed a Jewish Culture Month event after being informed that a large number of registered attendees were planning to disrupt the event.
Well, we're joined now by Rabbi Josh Levy, the co-leader of the Movement for Progressive Judaism. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Josh, let's just talk through, first and foremost, your reaction to that Helen Mirren clip, that really shocking footage. Some people describing this person online as a pro-Palestine activist, but I think actually there are more appropriate words to use for someone behaving like that.
So obviously it is really shocking footage, and you know, I think it comes within the broader context of our wider, the wider context of Jews and people who are in the conversation about what happens with Israel and Palestine, feeling that they are being publicly attacked and not physically safe, certainly not safe also on social media. And, you know, when one of our national treasures, someone like Helen Mirren, gets attacked in the street like that, I think it highlights some of those concerns that people in the Jewish community are feeling, you know, every day in our normal encounters.
Now, we're in the middle of Jewish History Month, and the British Museum were due to host a lecture about ancient Jewish history. We learned yesterday that they have postponed this after finding out that some of the potential attendees were planning on disrupting the event. Given the fact that the British Museum wants to keep its events safe and secure, do you think they were right to postpone it, or was it a cowardly act, as some have called it?
So look, I think the museum was placed in an incredibly difficult position. I think the first thing to say is that we have to, recognise the fact that the British Museum and other British cultural institutions were willing to and delighted to, positively to engage with British Culture Month and to host events. You know, they were doing the right thing, and then were placed in this incredibly difficult position. They have received quite a lot of criticism. I think. I understand where that criticism comes from, though personally don't think it's fair. I'm not sure they had any choice but to postpone this event when they discovered that a large number of people were there going to disrupt it. Because I think what would have happened is the story of the event would have been the disruption rather than what it should have been, which was a celebration of the fact that the Jewish community in this country is part of Britain's story, and in one of our national cultural institutions, you can see some of some of Jewish history there in central London.
But Josh, we're hearing from Kenny Badenoch saying the government needs to do what's necessary to make sure the event goes ahead. Do you think the right process has been taken here? Should there be more intervention to ensure this does happen, to show other would-be disruptors that they can't win? Because at the moment, this seems like a victory for those who don't want this to go ahead.
The museum and Jewish Culture Month have committed to this event taking place. I think everyone expects that this talk will happen. I think actually in some ways it's much more important that we ask the question, why is it that people want to disrupt a talk in the British Museum about the history of ancient Israel and Judah? It seems like it's an odd event that people should want to target in that way. And I think, we have to recognize that, the conversation around Israel and Palestine and the existence of the State of Israel has become so all-encompassing for some people that even an event like this, they're going to attend in order to disrupt. And of course, this event is kind of, this story is kind of politically quite problematic for those who are against the existence of the State of Israel or a Jewish connection to the land of Israel, because, what they were essentially going to talk about in this lecture was evidence of a historical connection of our ancestors with that kind of tiny sliver of land going back thousands of years, and we can see that evidence in this amazing institution in central London. So I think it's important that we kind of, rather than get caught up in the conversation about government intervention or the institution itself, actually we really think about what's going on in that moment that people would want to disrupt that.
Rabbi Josh Levy, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Right, we've got a statement from the British Museum posted on their website. They said, following discussions with organisers and security partners, a joint decision was taken to postpone the event to a later date when it can take place in an environment that properly safeguards both the audience and the integrity of the programme itself.
Well, lots more to come on Britain's Newsroom, including Nicola Sturgeon speaking out about her husband's embezzlement of SNP funds.
Stay with us. See you after the break.
Thank you, Britain, for the thousands of you who are becoming friends of GB News each and every week.
Good morning. This is the latest AI travel news from gbnews.com. Delays are on the A14 westbound near Kettering South, Northamptonshire, due to a vehicle fire. The M4 westbound near Tyebach has restricted lanes. The A303 westbound in Hampshire has partial closures due to a broken down vehicle, with normal traffic by 10:10. On the M1 northbound in Rotherham, a breakdown has closed one lane, but normal conditions are expected shortly after 10. And on the trains, cross-country services between Cardiff Central and Nottingham are reduced, while Great Western Railway has no trains between West Ealing and Greenford. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
£76,543 and 21 pence in tax-free cash could be yours this summer. That's totally tax-free cash to spend on anything you like. And remember, because it's totally tax-free cash, you'll get to keep every single penny for a chance to win. Text cash to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB21 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 26th of June. This is a network giveaway. Entries will be pulled. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back,
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
and we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning. It's 10 o'clock on Friday, the 29th of May. We are live across the United Kingdom. This is Britain's Newsroom with Charlie Peters and Miriam Case.
Hearing some very loud typing from Christopher Hope in the background there. Well, is this the murder of Henry Nowak? Is it the most clear example of two-tier policing?
I'm sorry that he was handcuffed and arrested in the moments before he lost consciousness.
Well, police handcuffed 18-year-old student stabbed victim after false claims of racism before he died. But no comment yet from the Prime Minister.
So far, only Sarah Jones, a junior Home Office minister, has said anything about this appalling killing. When will the PM speak up?
Elsewhere, a Jewish talk has been axed. The British Museum has postponed a Jewish lecture over fears protesters might disrupt the event. This as new footage has emerged of Dame Helen Mirren being accosted on the streets by an anti-Zionist.
There's Helen Mirren, the avowed Zionist. She said Israel should last forever because of the Holocaust. And she was very happy.
Well, the former Scottish First Minister Nicola Sturgeon has spoken out, saying she is living through probably the worst week of her life. We'll have the latest.
We are finalising the investment plan. That sits with the Strategic Defence Review.
Well, it's been finalised for a very long time. Where is the defence investment plan? That's the question coming from the Conservatives this morning.
This is, I think a real sobering report, and we cannot afford, we will not allow a lost generation.
Well, a youth employment drive. Ministers launch a major push to get young people working with 300,000 new placements on offer.
There's 7 conditions which we are now enabling pharmacists to provide a direct prescription for, and it's going to be called an independent prescribing service.
Well, a new £340 million NHS deal will allow pharmacies to treat patients faster to ease pressure on your family doctor.
Cars have to go more slowly. There's also fewer parking spots for cars, so that they can't open their doors in a cyclist's face, and there's fewer blind spots as well.
England's first ever cycle street has just opened in Cambridge, where cyclists take priority over cars. We'll have the latest.
There's been a huge rocket inferno because a Blue Origin rocket has exploded on the launch pad in Florida. Jeff Bezos' company has called it an anomaly. That really is quite the anomaly. It was a rather large explosion, gutting for all those scientists and the team working on it so much.
That's quite a British understatement, really, isn't it, for an American to call it anomalous? But talking of all the money that goes into aerospace and space, we're talking about defence spending as well. Today, we know there's a £28 billion gap in defence spending in this country, and yet a year after the Strategic Defence Review, no clue where that money is going to come from and how it's going to be spent.
Miriam Cates has a great link from one failing rocket to another. This is failing to launch, you could say, our military at the moment with this lack of investments. Keir Starmer, they're talking about they've been finalising this. It sits with the Strategic Defence Review, of course. That's just how it is. But where is it? It's been waiting for so long now. I know that we're struggling with the numbers at the minute. The country is rather skint but you have to make hard decisions when you're in a position of leadership. That's the whole point.
But I think that's probably the problem, because whatever they announce, someone will be very unhappy with whatever cuts or additional taxes that they bring out. But surely defending the nation ought to be the top priority.
Perhaps they could take a leaf out of the booklet of command, leadership and management from the people that they are not putting that investment in and just make a decision and stick to it.
Well, we'd love to know what you think. Send your views and comments to gbnews.com/your say.
Loads to get stuck into, but first, let's cross over to Tatiana Sanchez for all of the latest news headlines.
Thank you. The top stories. 2 people have been charged after a 30-year-old woman was shot dead outside the 141 bar in Sheffield city centre in the early hours of Monday morning. 30-year-old Jamel Roan has been charged with murder after Shanice Brooks was shot dead outside the bar. 32-year-old Darian Dice has been charged with assisting an offender, possession of ammunition, possession of drugs with intent to supply, possession of drugs and possession of criminal property. Both will appear at Sheffield Magistrates Court later today. An AI facial recognition tool that aims to detect adult migrants posing as children will be deployed at the UK's borders next year. A software company has been awarded a contract to develop the test technology, which will estimate a person's age by analysing photographs of them taken at the border. The Home Office says the technology will make it easier to identify adult migrants attempting to game the system after initial testing indicated promising performance and accuracy. But Human Rights Watch urged the government to scrap the scheme, describing it as unproven technology that will undermine the protections of vulnerable children. Elsewhere, the EU has hit out at Russia after a drone crashed into a Romanian apartment block, injuring 2 people. The drone crashed in the eastern city of Galati as Russia carried out attacks in Ukraine near the border. That's according to the ministry. EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen says Russia's war of aggression has crossed yet another line. Russian drones have strayed across the border of the NATO member country a number of times during the war with Ukraine, but it's the first time citizens from Romania have been hurt. NATO has condemned what they've called Russia's recklessness. In other news, prosecutors are expected to today decide whether to pursue a third trial of 2 brothers accused of assaulting a police officer at Manchester Airport. 21-year-old Mohammed Amaz and 26-year-old Mohammed Ahmad are accused of using a high level of violence to cause actual bodily harm to PC Zachary Marsden during a confrontation in July of 2024 that went viral on social media. Both men denied the charge, telling Liverpool Crown Court they acted in self-defence or in defence of each other. The US and Iran still need to work out several sticking points before an agreement on the war can be reached, Vice President J.D. Vance has said. The deal would reportedly extend the ceasefire for 60 days and launch talks on the future of Iran's nuclear program. Earlier on Thursday, US officials said the 2 countries had agreed a framework of a deal pending the approval of Donald Trump and Iran's leadership. But Iran's semi-official Tasnim news agency reported the deal had not been finalised or confirmed. Speaking last night, Mr. Vance said negotiators were going back and forth on a couple of language points, which include the question of enrichment. Elsewhere, a Canadian man accused of selling lethal substances linked to the deaths of more than 100 British people will not face justice in the UK. 60-year-old Kenneth Law is due to appear in court in Ontario later today. He's accused of aiding suicide after allegedly selling 1,200 packages across 40 countries. A National Crime Agency investigation into Canada-based websites selling substances to assist with suicide found 286 individuals received packages in the UK, leading to 112 deaths. But the NCA and the Crown Prosecution Service have written to bereaved families to tell them they wouldn't be seeking to extradite him to the UK after legal proceedings in Canada have concluded. Remains belonging to 6 of the 9 workers missing after a 3.4 million litre chemical tank imploded in Washington state have been recovered. It brings the total number of those confirmed and presumed dead to 11, including the 3 people still unaccounted for following the incident on Tuesday. At least 8 other people, including a responding firefighter, were injured after the tank ruptured and spilled close to 2 million litres of a highly corrosive chemical mixture known as white liquor, which is used to break down wood to make craft paper. Temperatures are expected to cool down across the UK over the coming days, following a record-breaking spell of hot weather, forecasters say. Warmth is set to remain in parts of the country today, particularly in the southeast, where highs of 28 degrees are likely, the Met Office says. Outbreaks of rain are expected to spread from the west before moving gradually eastwards on Saturday, according to the Met Office. And a Blue Origin rocket has exploded in a fireball during a late-night launch pad test in Florida. Officials say no one was injured and there's no threat to the public following the anomaly. Founder of Blue Origin, Jeff Bezos, has called it a very rough day, but too early to know what caused the explosion. The incident is a huge setback in the company's ambitions to narrow the gap with Elon Musk's SpaceX. Those are the latest headlines. More in half an hour.
You can now watch GB News live across the United States of America and the world on Truth Plus. Scan the QR code to find out more or visit gbnews.com/truth.
Hello and welcome to Britain's Newsroom. We're live across the United Kingdom on GB News with me, Charlie Peters, and her, Miriam Cates.
Indeed. Well, and you, because you've been getting in touch on gbnews.com/your say with your comments. Just read a few out here. Malcolm says, perhaps more attention should be directed to the dreadful behaviour of the murderer's family, of course, referring to that case we were discussing earlier on, Henry Nowak, who was murdered brutally, and then the police paid more attention to the claims of racism from his killer. Julie says the police need a completely reforming. It's beyond sickening that they can handcuff and leave a young white man to bleed out. And Catherine says, so because certain faiths use knives for ceremonial purposes, they should be allowed to carry them. What a ridiculous and very dangerous thing to be allowed. And there's this very interesting comment here from Gordon, who said it's irrelevant whether Henry Nowak was racist verbally. Of course, that was condemned by the prosecution as a wicked lie. But he goes on to say, stabbing someone to death for being offensive is not a rational response. Nobody should be murdered for words. And I think, Gordon, you're tapping into something very interesting, because there is implicit in this discussion some understanding or appreciation that the police might have been acting legitimately if Henry Nowak had used racist language. And of course he hadn't. But in that imagined scenario, which the police believed, where he had been racist, there is this feeling, in a sense, that, oh, well, if that was known to us appropriately, then we were sort of, in a way, we could have been right to take that action. I think it should. And maybe one of the discussions that will come from this, Miriam, is that people start to think about how we treat these public order offences, how we criminalise language, how the police are so quick to react to those claims and not an 18-year-old saying, I've been stabbed. And I think it's about priorities, isn't it? I think a member of the public would think that in order of the police priorities, being stabbed or other violent crime would be the number one thing that they seek to address when they arrive at a crime scene. Yet it seems to be racism or other acts of discrimination that they seem to be looking out for. That's what their antennae are looking for, perhaps because of years and years of diversity training. But it's so institutionalised now. Yeah, well, the police were very quick in the Met to release footage of arrests they made at the United Kingdom March a couple of weekends ago of people they arrested for public order offences, for language and for speech crimes, alleged. But they haven't released the footage, Hampshire Constabulary, of the moment of that arrest and indeed Nowak's death. Of course, the family will have something to say about that as well. Now, members of Parliament have condemned the police for handcuffing the dying teenager accused of racism by his murderer in what the court heard was a wicked lie. Policing Minister Sarah Jones said, this is a truly horrific case. All our thoughts with Henry's family and friends and what they're going through. Well, there's been no response or condemnation from either the Prime Minister nor the Home Secretary. Officers have since apologised following that guilty verdict yesterday after it was found that 18-year-old Henry Nowak had been stabbed 5 times in Southampton last December by Vikram Digwa. Let's take a listen to that apology.
I'm sorry that Henry's life couldn't be saved that night, and I'm sorry that he was handcuffed and arrested in the moments before he lost consciousness. When his killer made that call to police, and he called the police, not the ambulance service, he lied on that call. He lied when police attended the scene. He continued to lie as Henry's condition deteriorated. It is clear, and it is absolutely tragic, that it took them 3 minutes before they started to administer first aid. It is important, though, to say the pathologist has been clear. There's nothing officers could have done which would have saved Henry's life. Well, Vikram Digwa used a Kirpan ceremonial knife and was filmed telling his victim,
"I am a bad man," moments before the fatal attack.
Well, in the last half hour, we've heard from Reform UK's Robert Jenrick, who said that the Kirpan should be banned.
I do think the law should change. Is there a place on our streets for swords and daggers? No.
Yeah.
And should people be treated differently depending on their faith? No.
So Reform would change that law, then? That's
it would do. It's something that our Home Affairs spokesperson, Zia Youssef, is going to look at. But we believe in equality before the law. We should all be treated equally. And that means that, you and I should be treated exactly the same as somebody who is a Sikh, a Hindu or a Muslim.
Well, joining us in the studio now is our GB News political editor, Christopher Hope. Chris, good morning. Thank you for joining us. I think a lot of our viewers will have been quite surprised to find out that there is a religious reason to be allowed to carry a pretty lethal knife.
Yes. I mean, Scots won't be surprised because you can carry a skene do in your long stocking if you're wearing a kilt. It is allowed under law because it's part of the traditional Scottish Highland dress, and UK laws, the Criminal Justice Act 1988, provide legal defences for carrying bladed items for religious reasons or as part of national costumes. So, yes, there's huge concern, of course, about the use of the Kirpan in this killing. And in fact, the Tories yesterday went towards where Robert Jenrick is today, saying we should look at whether it could be a blunted weapon or can be made of, let's say, plastic. It can't be used to stab somebody or something like that. But if this were to go ahead, the Scots may be upset about it too. So, one man used a knife in an aggressive way. The government hasn't banned all knives yet, although some shops are now selling them blunted. I think Morrison's this week. Now, the Sikh community, they say this, of course, that on behalf of their community, they express their deepest condolences for the loss of life. Thoughts and prayers are with the Novak family and loved ones during this difficult time. The incident does not align with the Sikh faith, Sikh community, or the principles of what it stands for. Their teachings are on compassion, justice, humility, responsibility and service to humanity, and they remain a peaceful, well-integrated and deeply valued part of UK society. So there's one rogue individual who was Sikh who did the knifing, but whether this goes to a full banning of ceremonial knives, it will come across other problems. Now, you mentioned their lack of political response from the government. That is quite interesting. So yesterday, I was trying to get a response from the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer. The verdict came at lunchtime. He did a clip with journalists. We couldn't get the question to him in time for that clip. Number 10 haven't commented, nor has the Home Secretary. Sarah Jones, who's the Crime and Policing Minister of State, so a senior minister, but not the Home Secretary in that department, she says this: "This is a truly horrific case, and my thoughts are with Henry's family and friends. No verdict can undo the pain they are living with, but I hope today brings some small measure of justice. It's right that an IOPC investigation has been launched into the actions of the police to get to the truth. The IOPC is the Independent Office of Police Conduct. They are looking at this, and it may be, Charlie, that the body cam footage worn by the officers in this case could be released once that is over, because the police in that case, in this instance, are being treated as witnesses."
I just want to go back to that statement we've had from the Sikh community, from various community organisations that they've put out. I know you've read out the nice bits there, as it were, but there's some curious lines here, Chris, that I think actually need to be drilled into a little bit. First, they describe the killing as a moment of madness, for which there can be no excuses. I mean, that's an interesting piece of language to describe. Someone stabbing someone 5 times. Clearly, there are some character deficiencies that lead up to that moment. Is it a moment of madness, or were perhaps there some
warning signs? That'd be a legal issue. I'm not sure if the perpetrator claimed insanity or claimed any mental health issue. I don't think it did they?
Didn't. It's not madness. It was a chosen act of violence. And the statement says, the jury heard evidence that the incident was preceded by an altercation and allegations of racial abuse, but the jury ultimately rejected that claim of self-defence. Now, they don't say in this statement that that allegation was termed by the prosecution, who the jury did accept, that was a wicked lie. So there's almost a subtle hint in this statement about Vikram Digwa's case, about his claim as to why he did this. I think that's quite concerning. This would have been a good opportunity for these organisations to say it's sickening that these wicked lies were used as part of a defence for this vicious murder. Self-defence. What was self-defence?
Well, of course,
Novak was unarmed.
Well, and the jury rejected that. And And, of course, why did he call the police first, not an ambulance? And that crucial 3 minutes when he was handcuffed on the ground, when he was being stabbed 5 times, once in the face.
Now, Chris, where do we go politically? Because if this is a result of years and years of police diversity training our officers to look for incidences of racism and hate crime and discrimination, rather than practising keeping the public safe, how do we rewind this? I mean, there's the Equality Act, there's the College of Policing that's been responsible for a lot of this, offering promotions to people when they lean into the diversity agenda. I mean, Reform have obviously said what they've said this morning, but realistically, any government that comes to power is going to have a lot of work to do.
Yeah, and just perhaps recognise that some people can play the race card when it isn't there at all. I mean, that's what happened in this situation. He claimed a racist event, called the police, not the ambulance, and then the police handcuffed till they saw on the ground. I think, you know, the police aren't here to defend themselves. It was dark. It may not be clear that the shadow, if there's blood on the pavement as this poor man was bleeding out, it may be not clear that was blood if it's dark. I just don't know. We don't know the context. And again, the police body cam footage would actually help maybe dealing with understanding why the police handcuffed him as much as anything else. We don't know that, and they're not here to defend themselves. Again, the IPC investigation is going to be important to work that out.
OK, Christopher Hope, our political editor, thank you for that insight. And on gbnews.com/yours say, we've heard from Joyce Ivell, who echoes what Miriam Cates was saying moments ago, saying we need to be looking at the whole race relations industry. And I think the time will come for that. There's going to be a bit more of a focus on it now. We're seeing the Conservatives and Reform UK moving into being a bit more critical of those sort of race relations institutions and what they push, and clearly the negative and very dangerous impact that sort of thinking is having in many areas, but in particular, it seems, the police.
And at the root of all this, we've had a lot of immigration over recent decades, and there have been attempts by successive governments to try and legislate for that, to police a multicultural society, but ultimately it's failed. I think we need a different approach.
Can you have community cohesion and free speech? The state clearly perhaps doesn't think so. We do have a statement to bring you from the Independent Office for Police Conduct on that investigation. They say it began following a mandatory referral from the force that they received the same day. It remains ongoing. The officers involved are currently being treated as witnesses.
Well, moving on now, it's time for our Great British Giveaway. There's still plenty of time to grab your chance to win a whopping £76,543 and 21 pence in tax-free cash for the summer. Here are all the details you need.
Are you dreaming of a ton of tax-free cash this summer? We want to make that dream come true with a stunning £76,543 and 21 pence in cash to spend however you like. That is extra cash that you could use to buy those treats you've always wanted, put a new car on the drive, or just relax in the knowledge that this year we've got your back. £76,543 and 21 pence is an incredible amount of money, and it could be all yours. For a chance to win £76,543 and 21 pence in tax-free cash, text cash to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB21 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 26th of June. This is a network giveaway. Entries will be pulled. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Well, good luck, folks. Coming up next here on Britain's Newsroom, Sir Keir Starmer has rebuked the scathing criticism made by the former Prime Minister, Sir Tony Blair, saying he inherited a Britain very different to the Britain of 1997. Should Tony Blair get back in his box?
Well, we'll be going through that and much more with Dr. Renee Honderkamp and Jonathan Liss. You're watching Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Do you trust what you're being told? Good, because neither do I.
Those are just facts.
I'm Alex Armstrong, and on my show, we'll expose the spin.
Well, I want to answer that because you didn't let me last time, because you always speak over me.
The broken promises.
To deny that is denying the truth.
And the hypocrisy.
Needs to stop. You think we can allow?
Politics, policy, parliament. Nothing is off limits. No sugarcoating, no fear of offence, just the truth laid bare. Tune in every Saturday and Sunday at 9 p.m. for Alex Armstrong Tonight, only on GB News, Britain's news channel. 5 hosts,
5 opinions,
5 fearless debates,
5 unfiltered takes on the day's news.
5 reasons not to be anywhere else on Saturday night.
This is the Saturday 5.
You got me good there. Britain's biggest Saturday night TV show.
It's not a bad brand.
Yeah.
Uncensored.
Very, very racy tonight.
On the unpredictable.
What did she say? Can you translate it for us?
And always entertaining.
And how can a country go from being led by William Wallace to
Saturday nights from 6 p.m. only on GB News.
the People's Channel?
Britain's news channel.
You're going to want to stay tuned, trust me.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave. I'm so surprised. I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
No,
isn't it?
no,
Because the failure is...
You're
the failure is...
deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's political podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's political podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom on GB News, and we're now joined by Dr. Renee Honderkamp and journalist and commentator Jonathan Liss here in the studio. Welcome to you both. Thank you for joining us this morning. What should we start with? Jonathan, it's been a great week for Tony Blair, or has it?
Well, I think that Tony Blair has just revealed why he is no longer Prime Minister and why he doesn't have the answers that Britain needs. He wrote a very, very long essay, and Tony Blair does write very well. That's one thing you can certainly say about him. And he does have ideas about certain things, but so often he defaults to just really lazy assumptions about the world. And so there's an idea that he's clung to, that we have to stick with the United States no matter what. So that is not a position that is held by the majority of the British people, and it's not a position that's actually been proven right by what's just happened in Iran, because we see the United States flailing around everywhere, and if the United Kingdom had stuck with Trump completely...
Jonathan, let's move away from this US stuff, because I think the main criticism that's more interesting is the domestic stuff. You know, Blair was backing Alan Milburn's criticism on the policies that have led to this youth unemployment surge. I know the government of today has said they're creating 300,000 placements for young people, but actually the government shouldn't be creating these jobs. Just let ordinary businesses do it. And they can't at the moment, can they, Renee? And that's one of the main criticisms that Blair's got of Sir Keir Starmer.
I mean, look, we're looking at this weird situation where we have 1 million vacancies and 1 million young people under the age of 24 who cannot find a job. And nobody is scratching their head and going, well, hang on a minute, how do we get those properly? They're saying that they're looking at it, but they're not, because businesses can't do it because they've been taxed to the hilt by this government, and they're looking at every penny and just wondering whether or not they need to downsize, not upsize. Secondly, our red tape around kids. Kids can't have Saturday jobs anymore. I had one from when I was 12, and it gives you that work ethic and the power of money. We need to relax all of that legislation. We need to get kids back into work before...
Get kids back into work?
Yes.
When like Victorian times,
Saturday jobs, Jonathan, you mock. You like to mock. But Saturday jobs are an important stepping stone to people getting jobs. And we need to do this quickly before we're 5 years down the line and there are no jobs at the mundane level because AI has taken them. Listen to the boss from Google this morning. But what Blair is saying, I thought was eminently sensible. I listened to him interviewed on it, actually, on another radio station, and he was very, very sensible in what he said, even about the US and his reasoning for that, Jonathan. So forget what the British people might not agree with about the US. They might be wrong. And actually, let's look at our young people and say, well, hang on a minute. If we actually incentivise businesses to take them on, the £3,000 they're giving businesses to take on a young person doesn't cover the costs that they've imposed on them since they came to power.
The problem, the real problem, there are two problems that I've sort of seen in the Blair essay and to reading other people's responses to it. The first is that he treats AI as just something that we're going to have to accept, like it or not.
I agree.
And that there can be no democratic oversight of it. And that's, I think, a similar kind of attitude to the one that led us into disaster 17 years ago with the markets. And even now, you know, you talk about the markets, anyone who dares to question the bond markets in this country, it gets completely eviscerated in the right-wing press for saying, oh, you're going to lead us down to ruin, you're going to lead the markets, the investors are going to abandon us. We need to be able to have a conversation. We need to be able to have a conversation, Miriam, in this country about the markets and about how much democratic power we have over our own money, where the markets are treated like they used to talk about the gods in ancient Greek times.
The way to reduce their power over us is to reduce our debt, isn't it? Yeah. If you owed somebody £30,000, let's say, and then you went out and splashed a load of money on a holiday, they would quite rightly to say to you, no, hang on a minute, you need to pay me back first before you treat yourself.
Jonathan was saying we need to have a democratic conversation about the money.
I'm not saying that we should just default on our debts. I'm saying that we need to have a conversation in this country about how we structure the economy, and we can't have that because everything is so short-term.
We are having that conversation, and Renee, I think one of the concerns people have, talking about bond markets, so much of the discussion in the Labour Party at the moment does seem a bit... It's almost like a long-term desire and a sort of fantasy vision. That's what critics will say of it at the moment. But actually, when you look at the cold, hard facts, young people can't get jobs, the economy's really struggling, and the visions that are being put forward at the left of the party at the moment, and indeed much of the party, don't seem to match with that economic reality.
They don't, and I agree that it's complex because some young people don't want jobs, some young people haven't been prepared for jobs, some young people have been scarred by COVID. It is multifactorial, but unless we make it attractive for them and businesses to actually do the thing and give them jobs, nothing's going to change. And we're going to be 3 years down the line, if Labour lasts that long, with even more of these young people out of work.
Renee, don't you also think that a problem with the intervention was that he doesn't mention one of the key drivers of all of these phenomena that we've seen over the last 10 years from Brexit onwards, and that's inequality? And we're going to talk maybe a little bit about how young people can't get on the housing ladder, for example, in the next bit. So there's an idea that the society doesn't work for people. I mean, that you could argue the society never really has worked for everyone, but the level of inequality now, where people don't have an expectation of living as good a life as their parents, let alone a better one, and that there is such marked difference in wealth and aspiration and sort of potential outcomes across different parts of the country, across different sectors of demographics.
We need to build houses.
But we have, that's how, right, but
inequality has actually gone down.
Blair doesn't Jonathan, make that point.
Inequality has gone down as living standards have dropped as well. So maybe it's not a very good metric to determine this stuff, and perhaps that's why there needs to be a bit more of a focus on economic growth rather than focusing on inequality. If inequality gets lesser and lesser, and we all get poorer, that doesn't make anything better.
OK, but that's kind of what Thatcher used to sort of...
Maybe she was
complains about socialists when she said the socialists just want equality if everyone goes down here. That's obviously not what socialists want at all.
That's not a good reaction.
That's obviously not what socialism is about at all. It's about making sure that the water raises the boats for everyone.
Every single time.
Of course it's not.
We look at education to make everyone equal so there weren't losers. Education has been dumbed down dramatically. I can prove it. I sat A-levels 30 years ago. I sat them again 10 years ago. There's no comparison. We've dumbed everything down to make everyone a winner, but nobody's a winner. Everybody's a loser.
I think the big irony for me of Tony Blair's essays, there was some good, coherent ideas in that, but he completely fails to mention the role of the enormous reforms that the Blairite government made to our state, taking power away from Parliament, giving it to quangos, instigating things like the Equality Act that we're talking about today. Actually, that was the foundation of so many of the problems that we have now.
I think actually going back, many of our troubles to do with all of this are at the start of the Blair. Even what's happened to the NHS, because you had Project 2000 that was dreamt of there. Yes, I agree with you entirely, and he's not going to do that, is he? Just as Starmer isn't going to agree with him, he's not going to admit to his failings.
Right, Renee, Jonathan, we'll be back back to you in the next hour. But at first, let's cross over to Tatiana Sanchez, who's got a 60-second news update.
Charlie, thank you. The top stories. US Vice President J.D. Vance says the US and Iran still need to work out several sticking points before an agreement on the war can be reached. He says they're very close to a deal, but not there yet. In other news, 2 people have been charged after a 30-year-old woman, Shanice Brooks, was shot dead outside of the 141 bar in Sheffield city centre on Monday. An AI facial recognition tool that aims to detect adult migrants posing as children is to be deployed at the UK's borders next year. The Home Office says the technology will make it easier to identify adult migrants attempting to game the system. A Canadian man accused of selling lethal substances linked to the deaths of more than 100 British people will not face justice in the UK.
Jonathan Liss has just said his mum's texted to say that she likes his shirts. Because we're all about balance here on GB News, Peter Ralphs from gbnews.com/your says commented, has Liss just got out of bed? So there's a variety of views.
What's wrong with you?
I'm disappointed not to see another example of one of your funky cardigans, I have to say.
I am
But
not
it's a bit warm outside.
Wait until the autumn.
Jonathan and your very smart pyjamas will be back in the next hour. I was saying, actually, with Renee, she looked rather like a French cavalry officer from the Napoleonic era in this very dashing top.
It is a banging outfit.
Yeah.
It's fancy dress at Friday.
Up next, on the programme, where on earth is the government's defence investment plan? That's what the Tories are demanding today.
You're watching Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Hello, good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update brought to you from the Met Office. Another warm day in the southeast, so it will be cooler than yesterday. Dry for many of us, but there is a risk of showers and some thunderstorms, particularly in the southeast later on today. A damp start for parts of northern Scotland, some rain across parts of Northern Ireland too, but it's across the south we could see some thunderstorms build up from the near continent later on this afternoon. Dry weather in between these areas for much of England and Wales, and it will still feel warm out there. Temperatures in the mid-20s for many areas across central and southern areas, in the high teens, low 20s further north than that. Through this evening, those showers across the southeast where they do form should push away, and then we look to the north where low pressure is still dominating. Quite a brisk westerly breeze affecting coastal areas and the high ground of Scotland. Some outbreaks of rain, relatively light through this evening. Should be a dry end to the day across Northern Ireland, Northern England, parts of Wales, central areas too. You can see temperatures still in the mid-20s, so it will still feel quite warm out there to end this week of exceptional heat. And then overnight, clear skies for many areas. We've still got quite warm air with us, so it's still going to be a fairly warm night, though certainly cooler than it has been lately. So that may bring some relief if you've been struggling to sleep throughout this week. Temperatures by tomorrow morning, just 11 or 12 degrees for many of us. Some areas seeing single figures to start the day, which could be the first time in a little while. Now, this band of rain pushes into parts of Northern Ireland, much of Scotland throughout Saturday. As we look further east, it looks much drier through the day, so plenty of sunny and warm weather to come through Saturday across parts of England and Wales predominantly. We'll feel warm in that sunshine still, not quite as warm as it has been, but still highs of 28 in the southeast and in the 20s elsewhere, so perhaps a little bit more pleasant. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Britain, for making GB News Radio such a huge success. Whether you're in the car, on the go, or listening at home, thank you for choosing us as your radio station.
Good morning, this is the latest AI travel news from gbnews.com. On the M25 northbound, roadworks between junction 42 at Earlswood and junction 40 at Tyebach have restricted 3 lanes, leading to significant delays for commuters. Similarly, on Staffordshire's M54 westbound, there is partial blockage causing congestion. Norfolk's A47 westbound is experiencing 10-minute delays due to high traffic volume, while Hampshire's A34 southbound also faces disruptions. Meanwhile, Cross Country is operating a reduced train service between Cardiff Central and Nottingham, impacting passengers. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Welcome back. It's 22 minutes to 11. You're watching Britain's Newsroom with Charlie and Miriam.
Now, the Conservatives are seeking to push forward a deadline for the government to publish its long-delayed defence investment plan.
Well, the opposition party will call for a vote on its amendments to the Armed Forces Bill that would require the Defence Secretary, John Healey, to lay the defence investment plan before the Commons and Lords within a month of the legislation getting royal assent.
Well, our Home and Security editor, Mark White, joins us now in the studio. Mark, this has been very long delayed now, this plan. What do you make of the Conservative intervention on this?
Well, I don't think they can be blamed for this intervention, to be honest, because you have got very significant sectors of the defence industry, companies, saying that we are in real danger of having to lay people off, potentially going to the wall, because they're waiting, and they've been waiting for months and months and months to find out what on earth the government is going to do in terms of actual investment in defences. So we had now, a year ago, the Defence review, and the Defence review is about setting the strategic direction, the aims of what the defence of this country would be going forward in the key areas that they want to concentrate on. So the Defence Investment Plan is about actually, you know, the granular level detail about what that involves. How many warships are we going to commission, other types of vessels, planes that might be built, all of these things that industry need, the certainty, the orders, so that they can go forth and start, you know, building what we need in this country. But it's been delayed, and it's been delayed again. It was supposed to be published in autumn of last year. And every now and again, every sort of few weeks to a month, we get report, oh, it's due imminently within the next week or so. And then it's just kicked into the long grass once again. Now, we're told the latest, if you can believe any of this, to be honest, is that they have agreed, because there is real concern about the MOD budget, and credible reports that there is a black hole in that budget, a structural funding gap that's been there for years, to be honest, but has never really been reduced, of £28 billion. Now, what we're told is that the government has agreed a defence investment plan that will provide an additional 18 billion on top of the normal funding to the MOD to help address that structural funding gap. But it won't go, obviously, far enough. It will mean then some tough choices still that the MOD have to make here. And that's where we need to get some clarity on what on earth is happening, these companies that are waiting for these decisions. And all the while you've got Sir Keir Starmer, at the drop of a hat, off on the international stage, telling the world how he is leading the way in restructuring the way that our country is defended. We are, according to Sir Keir Starmer, in a new world, a world of much greater potent threats than there have ever been. And that's absolutely right. And so he says we're investing more in defence than any government since the Cold War. Well, is that true? We've not really seen it yet, just the talk of it.
But presumably the delay is due to arguments behind the scenes, indecisions amongst the top brass about what they want our armed forces to do, what they want us to focus on. We're no longer an extremely wealthy country. We can't do everything. Do you get any sense of what those arguments are?
I think you're exactly right. It's arguments over effectively the funding that the MOD wants to fulfil the objectives of the Defence Review and the strategic aims of that Defence Review. But the fact is that you have got the Treasury saying to the MOD, well, no, you can't afford to do all the things you want to do. So it's arguments over what is going to be the priority. And that's why you've got the government saying in code, we need to get the decisions right because we have a rapidly changing world environment in terms of the threats that we face. We want to make sure that we're investing in the right areas. Well, that's code for, yeah, we want to do all this, but the Treasury is saying you can only do this. So we've got to prioritise and decide what are the schemes that we need to invest in. So, for instance, we've just taken the first tranche of our F-35 combat jets, 48 of them. We lost one during a...
It fell off a ship.
As it was taking off, the covers were still on the back engines, so it was sucking in or unable to suck in air, and it lost thrust and it fell into the drink. So that multi-million-pound aircraft is lost. So we're down to 47. Half a dozen of them are actually in the States, part of a test and evaluation squadron. So you're reducing all the time, actually, those that we have available. And they're a resource for the RAF as well as for the Navy. So the RAF, for instance, had needed them to help bolster defences around the Middle East because of what has been playing out in Iran. So you take another 10 F-35s away to do that for a period of time. That means there are very few that are available to the Navy, and they're about to go on a massive deployment where they will require F-35s to go to the high north. So there's all these competing demands. We don't know what the government is going to do in terms of, are they going to order, as they have previously committed to, the next tranche of F-35 jets, or are they going to go for the F-35A, because they can carry these strategic nuclear weapons that the Americans have?
And Mark, we hear this term all the time from government, that they're delivering things at pace. We heard it last year when the Strategic Defence Review was announced, that they'd be adapting to new technologies at pace. But more recently, they've had to say that they are not failing drone manufacturers in Britain. We had one firm in the East Midlands, Skycutter, saying earlier this year they might move across the Atlantic if they don't get proper investment here. The government have said that they've quadrupled counter-drone spending to just £200 million. I know you've spoken a lot about that major hardware, but these new technologies as well, there's a major risk we could fall out of pace with that issue as well.
Yeah, well, and evidently they are not delivering at pace at all in any way, shape or form. But you're right. When it comes to the likes of Ukraine, that's about one of the only sectors with the likes of drone building and other munitions that we're sending to Ukraine, where some of the defence industries are getting regular work to help meet that supply of badly needed munitions and equipment for Ukraine, but not, again, at the pace that they expect or need, but at least a little more than some of the other industries that are required in terms of the defence of the realm.
Mark White, thank you very much for joining us this morning. I do wonder, Charlie, if this aim for a percentage of GDP to be spent on defence is the right one, because you can make money go as far or not far as you want to. There's lots of reports of fraud today. Wouldn't it be better to say we want this number of ships, this number of soldiers, this capability, and then work out how much it costs? Yeah, and also major questions for those in the military as well about how good they are at procurement. Yeah. Plenty of dodgy decisions made over the years, and I think some responsibility needs to lie with them next time they say, hand us over that big cheque. Anyway, coming up on the programme, we'll get some more reaction to that major Blue Origin rocket explosion overnight on a launch pad in Florida. What has Jeff Bezos described it as? He said it's an anomaly. Yeah. Very understated. But first, if you're in search of some holiday sun, here's the forecast for some of our top European destinations.
I forecast a perfect holiday in the sun.
Weather looking good then?
For sure, and no worries about our travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
As the warm and sunny weather leaves the UK, it continues across much of Europe with warm sunshine continuing. Still a few showers here and there, particularly across parts of Madeira, the Canary Islands. Relatively light though. Portugal and Spain seeing plenty of sunshine in towards Italy, Croatia, Greece and Turkey, perhaps a few more showers through this weekend, but they don't look particularly heavy or thundery like they have been recently. And the outlook is, well, there's more sunshine and warm weather to come. Bye-bye.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience, because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions. But every Friday night at 9 p.m, you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
11 World War II veterans here for the celebrations today, and one of them is Paul Terry, who served here in the Netherlands. In fact, Paul, this is what you looked like when you served here, and you served alongside your twin brother, whose medals you're wearing now. Paul, what do you remember about serving here in the Netherlands? Because the operation didn't quite go to plan, did it?
No, it didn't quite go to plan, and we were more or less ambushed, I suppose you call it, because, as I said, we were told that we were going to just walk into Ireland and liberate them and take it, but unfortunately that wasn't the case. I don't know where the cock-up happened, but when we arrived there, there were also the German Panzer Division, which is a tank division, and there the trouble started, and it was rather nasty from there on. We were halted where we should because we were land troops, and the parachutes, we were told the parachutes had landed, and they unfortunately copped it very badly.
So how does it feel then to be back here for the celebrations today?
Well, it's great, really. It really is great there. You see the smiles on the faces, and the Dutch people are so nice. It's unbelievable what they went through, and we honour them very much, and we do appreciate what they do for us when we do come over here, because they treat us like royalty. And there we are. I'm very happy to be back for the second time, but where I should get back for the third, I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. It's in God's hands.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I ever got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom. It is 11 minutes. No, it's not. It's 9 minutes to 11.
Right, the Isle of Man Tourist Trophy. It's one of the world's most prestigious and extreme motorsports events.
Well, riders race highly tuned superbikes on 37.73 miles of closed public roads at speeds approaching 200 miles an hour.
Well, the first week of the 2026 Isle of Man TT has seen 2 deaths and a series of high-profile crashes, one which sadly injured also 8 spectators.
Well, let's speak to our Northern Ireland reporter, Doogie Beattie, who joins us now. Doogie, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us on Britain's Newsroom. Bring us up to date where you're standing.
Well, you can see behind me now, I'm on the Glen Guthrie Road. This is the grandstand behind us. The track is just over a wall to the left-hand side. I mean, actually, if you just move round, if we move round a little bit, you can see there just behind me, this is some of the superbikes coming in after testing this morning. They're blowing air into those engines because these bikes towards Solby Straight are over 208 miles an hour. You can't imagine that sitting on that machine at 208 miles an hour on a public road. I mean, that road would become very, very narrow at that stage of the game. And if we just go around a little bit further, you can see here the other bikes preparing now to go out on the track. Racing doesn't really start here till tomorrow morning. This is all practices and qualifying. Dean Harrison has set a stunning lap from a standing start on Wednesday night of an average of 133.8 miles per hour. That's an average over 37 3/4 miles. What speed is he doing in most of that to create that sort of lap time? It is amazing, but I mean the manufacturers come here and they put great stand by what goes on here, the data that comes off these machines, tyre manufacturers, brake manufacturers. I mean, I've seen the brake pads that came out of Dean Harrison's machine after three laps, and they were blue and bent as they came out. Shows you the sort of braking that's going on there. But yes, wasn't something that an event that actually wasn't the Isle of Man. It was a classic race on the south of the island, and then sadly yesterday, of course, yesterday or on Wednesday, a crash in the super stock race bars practices. But that is the Isle of Man, unfortunately, and we'll be here until Sunday watching what's going on.
All right, Junior BT, thank you very much for that update. Some people, they do just love the thrill of that race, even though it can so often be a fatal thing to get involved with.
There are risks that are worth taking, risks that aren't. I am not a fan of motorbikes. But anyway, I can appreciate that some people enjoy the speed.
Right, up next on the programme, though, Andy Burnham. He's taken a brutal swipe at Tony Blair after his scathing essay earlier this week. You're not going to want to miss the reaction to that as more Labour infighting continues.
Well, this is Britain's Newsroom, Britain's favourite morning show on GB News, and there's plenty more to come after your weather.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Box Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Hello, good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update brought to you from the Met Office. Another warm day in the southeast, so it will be cooler than yesterday. Dry for many of us, but there is a risk of showers and some thunderstorms, particularly in the southeast later on today. A damp start for parts of northern Scotland, some rain across parts of Northern Ireland too, but it's across the south we could see some thunderstorms build up from the near continent later on this afternoon. Dry weather in between these areas for much of England and Wales, and it will still feel warm out there. Temperatures in the mid-20s for many areas across central and southern areas, in the high teens, low 20s further north than that. Through this evening, those showers across the southeast where they do form should push away, and then we look to the north where low pressure is still dominating. Quite a brisk westerly breeze affecting coastal areas and the high ground of Scotland. Some outbreaks of rain, relatively light through this evening. Should be a dry end to the day across Northern Ireland, Northern England, parts of Wales, central areas too. You can see temperatures still in the mid-20s, so it will still feel quite warm out there to end this week of exceptional heat. And then overnight, clear skies for many areas. We've still got quite warm air with us, so it's still going to be a fairly warm night, though certainly cooler than it has been lately. So that may bring some relief if you've been struggling to sleep throughout this week. Temperatures by tomorrow morning, just 11 or 12 degrees for many of us. Some areas seeing single figures to start the day, which could be the first time in a little while. Now, this band of rain pushes into parts of Northern Ireland, much of Scotland throughout Saturday. As we look further east, it looks much drier through the day, so plenty of sunny and warm weather to come through Saturday across parts of England and Wales predominantly. We'll feel warm in that sunshine still, not quite as warm as it has been, but still highs of 28 in the southeast and in the 20s elsewhere, so perhaps a little bit more pleasant. Bye-bye.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Box Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Are you dreaming of a ton of tax-free cash this summer? We want to make that dream come true with a stunning £76,543 and 21 pence in cash to spend however you like. Put a new car on the drive or just relax in the knowledge that this year we've got your back. For a chance to win, text cash to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB21 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 26th of June. This is a network giveaway. Entries will be pooled. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Westminster, the ultimate clique.
And you're fighting like rats in a sack.
But here on the Camilla Tominey Show, we ask the questions the establishment media is too scared to ask.
OK, let me ask you a straight question, because I know you're a straight-talking politician.
Whether it's net zero, illegal immigration or law and order, nothing is off limits.
You have the power then.
Yeah, as I
And
say,
now you've lost it.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show that's fearless.
But no, let me finish my question if you don't mind, because it is my show.
Sundays at 9:30, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Bold. They are under no illusion. Ray, are you a human trafficker? Boundless. I've had enough of the nonsense, and I'm not afraid to say it. Don't get us on the BBC. Every weeknight, I tear through the headlines. The smell of gasoline. Should we be worried about it? From Westminster madness to cultural war chaos. I'm going to do now, they are throwing things out the car as we speak. Get ready, Britain. Here we go. Patrick Christie's tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel. As soon as it hits 11 and the headlines come in,
the late edition brings you the breaking news from all the front pages.
Because the news is going to happen.
So get a head start today.
Patrick Christie's tonight, late edition.
Alex Armstrong tonight, late edition. From 11 o'clock every night.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I've been in Westminster for a long time. But I know that though power may be here, its effect on people's lives is across the whole of the country. We may be where rules are made, but it's where they're implemented that matters. Join me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, for forthright and frank discussion on where Britain has come from, where it's going, and where it will end up. That's State of the Nation, Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Vox Populi, Vox Dei.
It's 11 a.m. on Friday, the 29th of May. Live across the United Kingdom, this is Britain's Newsroom with Charlie Peters and Miriam Cates.
Well, Burnham fights back. Andy Burnham takes a swipe at the former Prime Minister, Sir Tony Blair, after his scathing essay this week.
That's right. Who might succeed Sir Keir Starmer as Prime Minister? Andy Burnham wants to. He wants more state intervention. He says it worked in Manchester. Could it work for the UK too?
I'm sorry that he was handcuffed and arrested in the moments before he lost consciousness.
Well, the police handcuffed an 18-year-old stab victim after false claims of racism before he died. Reform's Robert Jenrick has now called for the curb hand to be banned.
I do think the law should change. Is there a place on our streets for swords and daggers? No.
Elsewhere, Jewish Talk Acts, the British Museum postpones a Jewish lecture over fears that protesters might disrupt the event.
Elsewhere, Nicola Sturgeon speaks out. The former First Minister says she is living through probably the worst week of her life. We'll have the latest on that.
This is, I think a real sobering report, and we cannot afford, we will not allow a lost generation.
A youth employment drive. Ministers launch a major push to get young people working, with 300,000 new placements on offer.
There's been a huge rocket inferno. A Blue Origin rocket has exploded in the launch pad in Florida. Jeff Bezos' company has called it an anomaly.
Cars have to go more slowly. There's also fewer parking spots for cars, so they can't open their doors in the cyclist's face, and there's fewer blind spots as well.
Ever Cycle Street has just opened in Cambridge, where cyclists take priority over cars. Good idea or not? A multi-million-dollar rocket exploding on launch is a bit more than an anomaly, Charlie, isn't it? That's what Jeff Bezos has called it. But this is all about this competition, isn't it, with Elon Musk and boys with toys, but very expensive toys.
I'm very glad they have this competition. This is how we reach greatness, when two people sort of clash with their visions. I think they both support each other in a way. These are two, some of the richest men in the world. They recognise that through competition, greatness follows, and that in order to achieve greatness, sometimes you have to be forced to take a couple of steps back. And that is a big step back you're seeing on the screens. You know what? I reckon they'll all take it on the chin, as it were, and move on.
Well, as you said, competition drives progress, doesn't it? And I think sometimes they're criticised for spending all this money on space travel. Perhaps it seems a bit excessive, a bit of a luxury. But actually, all the money is spent on Earth, and it all delivers technology that we probably all benefit from. Microwaves and things like that.
Well, let us know what you think. GBNews.com/your say.
But first, here's the news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Thank you. The top stories. 2 people have been charged after a 30-year-old woman was shot dead outside the 141 bar in Sheffield on Monday. 30-year-old Jamel Roan has been charged with murder after Shanice Brooks was shot dead outside the bar. 32-year-old Dorian Dice has been charged with assisting an offender and possession of ammunition. Both are appearing in court later today. The EU has hit out at Russia after a drone crashed into a Romanian apartment block, injuring 2 people. The ministry says the drone crashed in the eastern city of Galati as Russia carried out attacks in Ukraine near the border. EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen says Russia's war of aggression has crossed yet another line. Russian drones have strayed across the border of NATO member country a number of times during the war with Ukraine, but it's the first time citizens from Romania had been hurt. NATO has condemned what they've called Russia's recklessness. In other news, prosecutors are expected to decide whether to pursue a third trial of 2 brothers accused of assaulting a police officer at Manchester Airport. 21-year-old Mohammed Amaz and 26-year-old Mohammed Ahmad are accused of using a high level of violence to cause actual bodily harm to PC Zachary Marsden during a confrontation in July of 2024 that went viral on social media. Both men denied the charge, telling Liverpool Crown Court they acted in self-defence or in defence of each other. In other news, people in England will be able to seek treatment for more conditions at their local pharmacy without being referred back to their GP, the government has announced. The £340 million deal means pharmacists with a relevant qualification will be able to make decisions and prescribe medicines on the spot. Ministers say the changes, which come into force this autumn, will ease pressure on family doctors. An AI facial recognition tool that aims to detect adult migrants posing as children will be deployed at the UK's borders next year. The software will estimate a person's age by analysing photographs of them taken at the border. The Home Office says the technology will make it easier to identify adult migrants attempting to game the system after initial testing indicated promising performance and accuracy. However, Human Rights Watch urged the government to scrap the scheme, describing it as unproven technology that will undermine the protections vulnerable children are entitled to. US Vice President J.D. Vance says the US and Iran still need to work out several sticking points before an agreement on the war can be reached. He says they're very close to a deal, but not there yet. The deal would reportedly extend the ceasefire for 60 days and launch talks on the future of Iran's nuclear program. US officials have said the 2 countries agreed a framework of a deal pending the approval of Donald Trump and Iran's leadership. Speaking on Thursday evening, Mr. Vance said negotiators were going back and forth on a couple of language points, which include the question of enrichment. Elsewhere, a Canadian man accused of selling lethal substances linked to the deaths of more than 100 British people will not face justice in the UK. 60-year-old Kenneth Law is due to appear in court in Ontario today. He's accused of aiding suicide after allegedly selling 1,200 packages across 40 countries. A National Crime Agency investigation into Canada-based websites selling substances to assist with suicide found 286 individuals had received packages in the UK, leading to 112 deaths. But the NCA and Crown Prosecution Service say they won't be seeking to extradite him to the UK, as after legal proceedings in Canada have concluded. And a Blue Origin rocket has exploded in a fireball during a late-night launch pad test in Florida. Officials saying no one was injured and there's no threat to the public following what they call the anomaly. Founder of Blue Origin, that's Jeff Bezos, has called it a very rough day but too early to know what caused the explosion. The incident is a huge setback in the company's ambitions to narrow the gap with Elon Musk's SpaceX. And those are the latest headlines. Here's the finance.
Taking the ups and downs in our stride. Stilts Home Lifts sponsors the GB News Finance Report.
The pound will buy you $1.34 and €1.15. The price of gold is £3,374 and the FTSE 100's at 10,441 points.
GB News Finance Report, brought to you by Stilts Home Lifts.
Hello, good morning and welcome. You're watching and listening to Britain's Newsroom. We're live across the United Kingdom on GB News with Charlie Peters and Miriam Cates.
Now, Andy Burnham is calling for increased state powers as he blames Blairite economics for the current state of mainstream politics.
Well, this comes as the former Prime Minister warned the Labour Party against a lurch to the left.
Well, joining us in the studio is our political editor, Christopher Hope. Chris, bit of a war of words here between Blair and Burnham. Blair's been very critical of government policies at the moment around so many areas, including youth unemployment and what's led to that situation. What's Andy Burnham had to say?
Well, there's a flurry of essays. Here's the first one from Tony Blair on Wednesday. Here's one from Keir Starmer last night on Substack. And here's Andy Burnham's today in the Times. So I've been through it all for you. It's all fine. No one panic here.
What Andy, really? Not yet. I might be about to.
Well, while they're writing essays, he's got to run the country. Sorry, but anyway, never mind. Essays,
It's
right.
not good for the trees, this, is it,
Well, it's
Chris?
exhausting. I mean, why write essays? I mean, honestly, I was back at school.
Well,
right,
do
here
you
we
think
are.
it's about time that they had a proper ideological debate that the right's been having
why
for
not
some
do it in
time?
opposition? I mean, part of this government's problem is they had 14 years to work out what to do. They haven't know what to do, so they've spent a half term writing essays to each other. It's totally ridiculous. Anyway, Andy Burnham is replying to Tony Blair. Tony Blair said on Wednesday, of course, that he thinks that this party is in a delusion of soft left thought, hasn't really thought out what to do next. We heard from Keir Starmer last night. He said Tony was right on some things, wrong on other things, and said why he's right. But the news is that Andy Burnham, who could replace Keir Starmer as Prime Minister if he gets back to Parliament, he is calling for a more interventionist approach in an essay in the Times today. He talks about the issue, which is correct, and you were saying off air, Miriam, the lack of mention of inequality in Tony Blair's analysis. He says he read the piece, waiting to hear from Tony Blair on this. It's a gaping hole in his analysis. He says these parties have faltered. They were too bound into model of globalisation. That goes towards the immigration issue, kick-started under Labour, carried on through the Tories, and then latterly into the Conservatives. And in summary, he says, we think there should be good growth in Greater Manchester. He says, we have intervened in the market because the market wasn't working, and that's where his government will go.
I think it wasn't necessarily inequality that Andy Burnham was mentioning, but the cost of living, and that's what comes up on the doorsteps. And one of the drivers of the cost of living increase has been the massive increase in inflation we've seen in this country as a result of massive government spending and printing money, which Gordon Brown started in response to the government crash. So that was the glaring omission to me in Blair's analysis, was the impact of his government's decisions on the situation we see today.
And the answer from Andy Burnham is the state should intervene, and he says that's what happened in Greater Manchester. He talks about getting the train into Manchester, and you can see from the West Coast mainland the work that's been done there.
I suppose, Chris, I know we've had the Prime Minister write his Substack response to this, but isn't it rather telling that the main debates about the future of the Labour Party, its policies, its politics, appear to be happening outside of number 10 at the moment?
Well, that is the politics, because we're waiting until see the result of a by-election, and that could bring Andy Burnham back. Of course, other candidates are standing in that too. We'll see how that plays out. Wes Streeting, he's made his own interventions. He, of course, was formerly the Health Secretary. He's lurching to the left, it looks like, in other essays that have been written this week, because he needs to sort out the left of the party. There's every chance that I think Keir Starmer could be the PM by Christmas, because I think I can see all the other campaigns falling away, and he is the second most popular amongst members behind Andy Burnham, and he's not even an MP yet. So all to play for. It's been a quiet time in Parliament, so there's lots of essay writing by candidates who want to replace Keir Starmer.
Perhaps it is about time, though, that on the left they did have this battle of ideas, because for so long all they've talked about is being the grown-ups in the room or good governance, and actually they haven't had any ideas apart from not being the Conservative Party.
Well, for my podcast out today on GB News called Chopper's Political Podcast, we interviewed Peter Hyman. He was for 10 years in Number 10, an advisor, comms advisor and strategic advisor to Tony Blair, and 2 years advising Keir Starmer. He said that they all presented Keir Starmer with a 10-year plan for government, taking him up to and past the next election to sort out the problems facing this country, bureaucracy in Whitehall and the like, and that was junked almost as soon as they arrived. So there was a plan. It was dropped by 10 Downing Street when Keir Starmer came in, and now over half-term, everyone who wants to be Prime Minister is trying to do essays about what to do in government. But frankly, get on with it.
Produce another essay there Chris.
Yes.
Picks up another one there.
Well, this is another report from Peter Hyman inside the young mind of young NEET. That means not in unemployment training, education. Forgive me. I think it's very moving. I think as a father of people trying to get work at the moment, they are working in a rejection economy. Employers can do more. Many of them are stuck in what he calls here as a bedroom generation.
Well,
deeply upsetting for parents and all our generation.
Yeah, and Blair's target to get 50% of young people in higher education, huge increase in debt. Now many of them also on the jobless pile. That was a failure too.
With degrees, they can't get work and they're saddled with debt. To get a job, they go up a certain threshold, they're paying more to pay down that debt.
OK, Christopher Hope, thank you very much. And on that issue, forgive me, of youth unemployment, I'm going to talk about another contributor there, which is the impacts of mass immigration. We saw youth unemployment figures yesterday. In The Critic, they've been writing that we live in an immigration fantasy land.
Well, joining us to speak about this is the contributing editor at The Critic, Chris Bayliss. Chris, good morning. Welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us. Now, you've written a piece in response to a report published by British Futures, I believe, that basically says the public's got it all wrong on immigration. We overestimate the number of immigrants and actually we should stop making a fuss. What do you say to that?
I think we might have a still image of Chris Bayliss there, who's not currently with us. But Miriam, you've read this piece thoroughly. Talk us through it.
Well, it's really interesting. So there's a piece written by British Futures, which has actually had a think tank that's had nearly £500,000 actually of government grants. They're essentially saying that immigration is a big issue in British politics, but the problem is the public just don't understand the numbers, and the public overestimate the amount of immigration, and the public haven't given the government credit for the fall in net migration that we've seen in recent years.
That's their argument.
That's their argument, which is fair enough. But what they don't seem to understand is that people don't object to immigration just for the sake of the numbers, but for the long-term impact on society. And it's all very well to reduce that number, but what about the long-term trends?
And also, when you look at the impact of mass immigration on the economy, which is this argument that's made by so many think tanks and pro-immigration groups, perhaps if we had a correct relationship between mass immigration and economic growth, we would not have seen the stagnation that has come after the largest level of net migration in our history. Right, we're not going to be able to speak to Chris Bayliss. I'm afraid we'll try and grab him another time. Clearly, he's got some dodgy Wi-Fi, but I don't know, maybe he'll sort that out sometime.
Well, it's time for the Great British Giveaway now. There's still plenty of time to grab your chance to win a whopping £76,543.21 in tax-free cash in time for summer. Here are all the details you need.
Are you dreaming of a ton of tax-free cash this summer? We want to make that dream come true with a stunning £76,543.21 in cash to spend however you like. That is extra cash that you could use to buy those treats you've always wanted, put a new car on the drive, or just relax in the knowledge that this year we've got your back. £76,543.21 is an incredible amount of money, and it could be all yours. For a chance to win £76,543.21 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB21 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 26th of June. This is a network giveaway. Entries will be pooled. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Right, up next on Britain's Newsroom, find out why experts say that most British men should not be offered prostate cancer screening, a move campaigners say will condemn thousands to death. It's pretty cheery.
We'll be going through that and more with Dr. Renee Hunderkamp and Jonathan Bliss. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
So he can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
No,
Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
From court mornings
to warm family brunches.
From football to tennis in the car.
In the kitchen.
GB News Breakfast is there. With the stories you need and the conversations that matter.
Anyway, let's talk business.
Well, it has been a historic night in British politics.
It's astonishing, isn't it?
We're here again.
To start your day just right. GB News Breakfast.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 20 minutes past 11. You're watching Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
We're joined by our contributor, Dr. Renee Hunterkamp, and the journalist and commentator and home favourite, Jonathan Liss, back in the studio for this hour. Great to have you both in here. Look, we've got to start with some serious stories because, of course, this the guilty verdict yesterday in Southampton for the murderer of Henry Nowak, that started a serious discussion, Renee, about how the police responded because he was handcuffed. And, of course, there's been so much focus on the fact that it took a long time for them to react to the fact that he'd been stabbed. Instead, they believed this wicked lie made by the murderer, Digma, that he had been subjected to racist abuse.
I mean, look, my heart goes out to, obviously, him and his family. And as a mother, I think about the mother thinking about his suffering beforehand, listening to that wicked man lie as he lay there handcuffed. It's absolutely shocking. But I do think it would have been entirely different if that had been somebody of a different colour, if it hadn't have been a white boy. I think they wouldn't have handcuffed him. They wouldn't have necessarily believed the racist slur that was made. And it is, we've bent over backward again. It's how we got the grooming gangs, Charlie, that nobody was prepared to call out that, you know, this racism that was going on against these young girls. And now here again we have the police demonstrating after Stephen Lawrence, where they've just swung the pendulum too far the other way. You know, there needs to be a middle ground where everybody is treated equally, regardless of their race, their colour or anything else.
Jonathan, do you think what we've seen in some of our institutions, and quite evidently in the police in this case, is a kind of indoctrination with this diversity and inclusion dogma that changes the way people think so much that instead of arriving on a scene and using their common sense to see what's going wrong, what the priorities should be, they immediately fall into the trap of how do we make sure that we are not being racist? How do we make sure that we are delivering on the equalities agenda? That seems to be what's happening here.
I think that two things can be true at the same time. If you turn up to a scene of an incident and someone clearly has stab wounds, obviously that should be the first thing that you're looking for, regardless of the colour of that person, and that person needs to be treated immediately. So if there are mistakes that were made in that case, then clearly they need to be learnt. I think that's a separate issue from somebody alleging a racist offence. Obviously, if someone alleges a racist attack or some kind of racist incident, then that needs to be investigated as well. Sometimes it does happen that the police will handcuff someone who turns out to be wholly innocent, and that's very, very regrettable. And I'm always looking for ways the police can improve, and that obviously is one of them. You know, at the same time, you know, I'm not a police officer, obviously, and I know that if you are if you're coming to the scene of a crime or the scene of something where something terrible has happened, and it's a fast-moving situation, you have to contain the situation, see what injuries have been made. Then mistakes can be made in the spur of the moment.
Let's go through the apology that the police have provided, because they said that their officers were misled at the scene, including denial of weapon use. And they're going to say, as we're expecting in the upcoming investigation by the watchdog, there was a complex situation. But, you know, it doesn't really run solidly, that, does it? You know, this boy told us he'd been stabbed.
Yeah.
And the man who stabbed him said, actually, no, I hadn't. So we went back to this sort of believing everything when there's an allegation of racism, and we handcuffed him instead.
Not looking and believing what you see in front of your eyes.
That's not good policing.
I think the whole apology, Charlie, is... There are many, many things wrong with it. Firstly, they didn't wheel out the superintendent, they wheeled out the deputy. You know, if this had been a boy of a different colour, we would have been wheeling out politicians and, you know, this superintendent and everybody else and his brother. Secondly, to say, you know, what we did was wrong, we're really sorry, but the pathologist tells us that actually we couldn't have saved him anyway, is absolutely disgusting.
That's an upsetting response.
It's disgusting.
It is very poor.
I just... The only thing I would say is that I would not necessarily run to judgment about the skin colour thing. Obviously, this is complicated because there is a man who has manipulated racism for his own ends.
No kidding. Does that happen?
And clearly, that's not a good faith invocation of what racism is.
Let's do a bit of a thought experiment here. Do you think that those officers from the Hampshire Constabulary would have handcuffed Digwer if they had turned up at that scene and Henry Nowak said that I suffered anti-white racism from that man? In the same scenario, if the races were reversed, what do you think would have happened?
I probably think that they wouldn't have done that because obviously anti-white racism isn't as, it doesn't manifest itself in the same way, and
it's not taken as seriously.
Well, white people are not subject to racist violence in this country.
Have you heard of the grooming gang scandal?
That other people are in the same way.
We just don't talk about it the same way.
Look, white men it's very unlikely that white men to be targeted on account of their race per se. Whereas obviously for people with different skin colours, they experience racism in a different way. I'm not saying that white people can't experience racism. I'm not saying that white girls can't experience racism. I'm saying that it manifests in a different way. That when I'm walking down the street, if I'm worried for my safety, it's not because of the colour of my skin. Whereas if I was black or brown, that might be an added factor. I don't think it's controversial to say that.
But doesn't this come back to, Renee, what we were talking about earlier, which is that the police are now so programmed to look for these hate crimes, this discrimination, that it's colouring their judgment in keeping the country safe?
100% that's what happened here. Apparently, Henry was not combative in any way, shape or form. So handcuffing him, whatever colour, wouldn't have been necessary because he wasn't a threat to them.
And what do you make of the lack of response from some of the senior politicians on the left? We had Robert Jenrick in here earlier talking about how in previous heinous crimes like this, everybody would be rushing to send their condolences to condemn what happened. And yet we've had silence.
Floyd, we had our Prime Minister taking...
And that didn't even happen in this country.
It didn't happen here. It's a completely different response.
Well, but also because he wasn't... I don't think that he was attacked on account of his... This wasn't a racist attack, as I understand it. He wasn't attacked because he was white, as I understand it. That would have been a hate crime, and that would have... that's the kind of crime that does invite sort of political condemnation and so on.
There has been wider reaction to this shocking and scandalous criminality, though, because we heard earlier this morning Robert Jenrick speaking to this programme saying that reform would ban the Kirpan. That's now been backed up by Zia Youssef, their Home Affairs spokesperson, and they'd ban that ceremonial dagger. We've heard some criticism, including from our colleague Mark White, that this perhaps could be letting the police off the hook here, because if they focus more on the knives rather than the ideology that leads to the issue, this is a problem. I mean, the Sikh community, by and large, are not going out and about involved in massive knife crime. We don't see that problem, even though lots are allowed to carry these weapons.
And with respect to the Sikh community, they were very quick to be out there and condone what had happened and make a statement. What did I say? Condemn, sorry.
Yes.
Condemn, sorry.
I'd say the statement was a bit iffy for different reasons, but it's interesting, isn't it? We're talking about the knife rather than the underlying problem, which Miriam's been talking about a lot as well, which is this race relations industry that has led to this sort of racialised thinking, which leads to such scenarios.
I think that's a somewhat cynical interpretation to call it a race relations industry. That suggests that it's based on something that doesn't exist or has been overblown. I don't think that racist violence is overblown in this country. There are documented accounts of it, and it's rising. So clearly this is, when you talk about an industry, yes, obviously there are people who are employed in work that is intended to counter what is an evil in this country.
So here's an example of someone who's employed to counter it. People involved in dealing with Axel Ruda Cabana said it would be bad to stop him him because he would be seen as a black boy with a knife. People who were working as security at the night of the Manchester Arena bombing didn't stop Salman Abedi because of his race. They were nervous because we have generated this way of thinking, don't you think?
But
Renee?
also, don't forget, and Jonathan, this is backed up by stats, the UK is the least racist society in Europe. People here of colour or of any other race feel safer here than any other place in Europe. So to say that it's a blight on our society, I have lived through the 80s and the 90s with a black partner. I have seen racism in my face. That doesn't happen now. Not like that. Things have changed.
Of course, I'm sure. I think things have changed. I'm not saying that we are back in the 80s. Although some of the language that you'd have heard at BNP rallies in the 70s, I now hear regularly on mainstream media broadcasts. The kind of shocking language of remigration or about invasions of non-white people and all the rest of it. You know, I've had a couple of debates with people on this very channel with people whose views I think would not have been heard on mainstream television sort of 20 years ago. So I think that things are actually getting worse in some ways, and things have been better in others.
But isn't the problem, Jonathan, is that, yes, there are disparities between different communities, different ethnicities, between men and women, but it doesn't follow that those disparities are due to discrimination, and that's the mistake that we've made. And actually,
it's not just chance, is it?
No, it may not be a chance, but there are different structural issues. For example, one of the reasons that gangs are full of so many black boys disproportionately, that black boys get expelled from school, is because they have extraordinary levels of fatherlessness compared to other ethnicities. We see a little bit of that amongst white working class boys as well. Now, those are structural disparities, that is true, but that's not a result of discrimination. And I think the problem is we have interpreted all differences between all communities as some sort of discrimination that the state has to put right, and then we go down this route and we end up with this horrendous situation like we've seen in the video.
Obviously, the problems that we see in society are sort of multivalent and intersectional, and all kinds of things are feeding into them. Obviously, poverty is a huge one. Education, yes. Family composition may also be a factor, of course. And obviously, the state can't solve every problem, but there are some things the state can resolve, and that sort of takes us back to the conversation we were having before about inequality, because obviously inequality is a huge driver of criminality, as we know perfectly well.
But are we not pushing inequality where we've got people who are already feeling disenfranchised, feeling that life is not equal, and I agree with you, but we are shipping in people. 900,000 people came here legally last year on visas. We have the boat people still coming in massive numbers, especially when the weather's good. We are adding to that feeling. We are not taking away from it.
Renee, we have seen now the lowest net migration in years and years, and it's it's actually not. If you look at the Office of National Statistics and the Home Office have both confirmed that actually it's not because of emigration. Emigration has actually been static for a number of years. This is about fewer people coming, and I guarantee you that when we come back here next year or the year after, and we see that net migration is reduced even more, perhaps to net zero migration, the only net zero this channel perhaps approves of, then we will see that lives have not got better in this country, that people are still feeling that their lives are worse than ever. And guess what? We won't have migrants to blame anymore. So what will we have to blame? Perhaps we'll have to look for other things. The boat crossings are actually down for, I think, 40% from last year.
Over 1,000 over the weekend, though.
And I'm sorry, 9,000 people coming here on a boat are not the reason that people are feeling like their lives are getting worse and worse. That is absolutely not the reason. It's not the reason. It's not the reason that food prices are going up. It's not the reason that people feel disenfranchised in the local communities.
Okay,
it's not the reason that public services are on the floor. I'm sorry.
OK, vote for Jonathan, folks. Right. Jonathan Lewis, Renee's Undercamp, thank you very much for your time this morning. The Sikh community did issue a statement, which you heard about from Renee earlier. They say that their thoughts remain with the Noack family, and the incident, they say, does not align with the Sikh faith and the Sikh community. I recommend you go and look at that statement in full online.
Well, the Crime and Policing Minister Sarah Jones MP had this to say: "This is a truly horrific case, and my thoughts are with Henry's family and friends. No verdict could undo the pain they're living with, but I hope today brings some small measure of justice."
It is right that an IOPC investigation has been launched into the actions of the police to get to the truth. We've also heard from a spokesman for the Independent Office for Police Conduct. The watchdog said that their investigation, which began following a mandatory referral from the force that they received the same day, remains ongoing, and the officers involved are currently being treated as witnesses.
Very shocking story. Well, we're going to move on with much more on Britain's Newsroom, but first of all, we've got your 60-second news update with Tatiana Sanchez.
Miriam, thank you. The top stories. US Vice President J.D. Vance says the US and Iran still need to work out several sticking points before an agreement on the war can be reached. He also says they're very close to a deal, but not there yet. In other news today, 2 people have been charged after a 30-year-old woman, Shanice Brooks, was shot dead outside the 141 bar in Sheffield city centre on Monday. An AI facial recognition tool that aims to detect adult migrants posing as children is to be deployed at the UK's borders next year. The Home Office says the technology will make it easier to identify adult migrants attempting to game the system. And a Canadian man accused of selling lethal substances linked to the deaths of more than 100 British people will not face justice in the UK. 60-year-old Kenneth Law is due to appear in court in Ontario later today. Those are the latest headlines. For now, more from me at midday.
For all the latest from GB News whilst you're on the go, get the GB News app. Scan the QR code now to download or visit gbnews.com/app.
Well, coming up at noon, we've got Good Afternoon Britain with Mark and Nana, who've just described themselves as an old married couple. So what will you be arguing about today?
It's Manana, Mark and Nana. Manana. See what I mean? No, well, we're going to talk about the Novak case because it's absolutely awful. I mean, when I look at that, the worst bit about it, in my view, even if you're looking at racism as a whole, is that it's not even, and I wouldn't say it was acceptable either way, but it's white people doing this to other white people. So there's not even. It's almost as though there's been some sort of indoctrination of how you're meant to think. So critical race theory, all these things that say, oh, poor black people, or poor people of colour. So when we see them, we are above, so we must treat them with a level of compassion that really wasn't warranted in this case. And I think we need to start looking at why we are behaving in this way.
I wonder, Mark, we'll get into that issue with the knives being banned. That's being pushed out by reform.
Yeah, and I don't think we should get caught up in that distraction because that's what it is. We shouldn't forget what the real issue here is, and that is police responding to a young man involved in an incident who's telling them he's been stabbed, and they ignore that element, which is a pretty important element to be told, to go and to deal with the brown-skinned person who claims that they have been racially abused. And to me, this just speaks to the fact that I honestly think the police service, like so many other institutions in this country, have been captured. They are absolutely petrified to ever be seen as not properly responding to someone if they make a claim that they have been somehow racially abused. The very worst thing you could ever be is accused of being institutionally racist because you haven't responded in the right way. And I do think that then affects some of the decision-making at a local level like this.
It's almost as though
awful.
Racism, somebody's been stabbed. Well, you know, that can't be the response at any level. But it will be interesting if that body-worn footage is released at some point.
He'll be sentenced, this murderer, on the 1st of June, back at Southampton Crown Court. But Mark and Anna, I think one of the key pieces of justice that perhaps could be given to the Nowak family is that this horrible incident sparks a conversation that might force change in that institutional capture that you're speaking about, Mark. Perhaps this might be an opportunity to really turn a corner and prosecute this mode of thinking. But so far, we haven't heard from the Prime Minister, haven't heard from the Home Secretary, who have in the past opined on issues that aren't related at all to British policing.
Well, maybe they might be waiting till
deafening silence. Yeah. So what else will we be talking about? We'll be talking about a decision that's about to come through on whether there will be a retrial in that Manchester airport incident in which police officers responding to reports of a man being assaulted there came up against these 2 Asian males with a very significant and violent disorder that broke out within that car parking facility at Manchester Airport a couple of years ago. And small boats.
Of course, small boats.
Coming back across the channel. Shocker. Good weather, no wind.
Perfect
Forth come
conditions.
the migrants.
Yeah.
Well, maca-na-na-na-na. Thank you very much. We'll look forward to seeing you up at midday.
Banana.
All right, we'll let them go.
Oh, dear.
Right, up next on Britain's Newsroom, former First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon. She says that she's had the week from hell, and that's before she heard Manana, and that she was deceived and betrayed by her estranged husband, Peter Morrell, over those embezzled funds.
This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Hello, very good day to you. This is your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Now, it is going to feel fresher than it has done through much of this week for many of us, but still quite hot in the southeast, and worth highlighting there will be a bit of rain around for some of us. Across parts of the southeast, there's a front bringing some showery bursts here, and across parts of the northwest of the UK, there's some, well, mostly light, drizzly rain, but perhaps some heavier bursts towards the far northwest of Scotland, this becoming more confined to just far northern parts of Scotland as we head towards the evening. In between those two areas of rain, there's actually a good deal of fine sunny weather to be had through today, but like I said at the start, a fresher feel than of late, temperatures reaching the high teens, low 20s for many, but perhaps mid to high 20s towards the southeast. Into this evening then, and still a bit of rain around across some parts of Scotland, like I said, becoming largely confined to northern areas as we head through later on in the day, and in fact some eastern and southern parts avoiding much of the rain through a large chunk of the day, so staying generally dry. A fine end to the day across Northern Ireland and across much of England and Wales. Just in the southeast, a bit of cloud, a little bit of showery rain continuing, but here it is going to turn drier through into the start of the night as any showers clear away. Also clearing away will be the rain across northern parts of Scotland. It will take a little while to do so, but it is going to turn largely dry for a short period of time. I say short period of time because there is a front coming in from the west, and that's going to bring rain to Northern Ireland and western Scotland later on. Temperatures will be a little bit lower than some recent nights, clearer skies, slightly fresher air, allowing some places to drop into single figures, so a bit more comfortable for sleeping for many of us. And then into Saturday, well, a bit of a northwest-southeast split, wetter, cloudier towards the northwest, particularly across Scotland and Northern Ireland, across the bulk of England and Wales, especially towards the southeast, staying fine, lots of sunshine and still pretty hot. Could see very high 20s in the southeast, so watch out for that. Bye-bye.
5 hosts, 5 opinions, 5 fearless debates, 5 unfiltered takes on the day's news.
5 reasons not to be anywhere else on Saturday night.
This is the Saturday 5. You got me good there. Britain's biggest Saturday night TV show.
It's not a bad brand.
Yeah. Uncensored.
Very, very racy tonight.
On the unpredictable.
What does she say? Can you translate it for us?
And always entertaining.
And how can a country go from being led by William Wallace
Saturday nights from 6 p.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
You're going to want to stay tuned, trust me.
As soon as it hits 11 and the headlines come in,
Late Edition brings you the breaking news from all the front pages.
because the news is going to happen.
So get a head start today.
Patrick Christie's tonight, late edition.
Alex Armstrong tonight, Late Edition. From 11 o'clock every night.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So breaking news to bring you now. A court has decided against a retrial in the case of 2 brothers who are accused of assaulting a police officer at Manchester Airport 2 years ago.
Mohammed Fahir Amaz, 21, and Mohammed Ahmad, 26, were charged with using a high level of violence against a police constable. Amaz was previously found guilty of assaulting other officers during the same incident in July 2024.
Well, both men deny the charge, claiming they had acted in self-defence. With that breaking news just coming into us now, there will not be a retrial in the Manchester Airport case. Well, our home and security editor, Mark White, joins us now in the studio for reaction to this breaking news. Mark.
Well, listen, you're looking at images there of that very violent incident that unfolded on the 23rd of July in 2024 at Manchester Airport. That was at a ticket machine for one of the car parks at the airport there. Police were responding to reports that another man separate to this incident had been assaulted, and a suspect answering the description was currently in this ticket booth area, and that suspect was Mohammed Fahir Amaz, 21-year-old, who was there with other members of his family, including his brother Mohammed Ahmad. It was when those Greater Manchester Police Airport officers tried to detain Mohammed Fahir Amaz that the scuffles, very violent scuffles, broke out. There have been 2 trials now. A trial that took place more than a year ago, which Mohammed Fahir Amaz was found guilty of assaulting 2 female police officers at the scene there. Those officers were injured in the attack. Lydia Ward, I think, was one of the officers who was attacked and suffered a broken nose, PC Lydia Ward, and PC Ellie Cook was also knocked over and injured during the same attack. He was found guilty, Mohammed Fahir Amaz, of assaulting those 2 officers and also of assaulting the individual who had earlier claimed to have been attacked by Amaz. But when it came to PC Zachary Marsden, the officer that you'll remember this gained such notoriety because PC Zachary Marsden was filmed sort of kicking into the head area of Mohammed Amaz as he was trying to, in effect, his arrest. But of course, as usual with these incidents, it was filmed on mobile phone, and it was just at the point that PC Marsden was kicking the head of Amaz on the ground. You saw none of the other violence that had led up to this. The fact that you could clearly see on the video that it appears that this officer himself was being attacked by not just one but both of the brothers. However, it's gone to a trial. The first trial, the jury was unable to reach verdicts of guilty on that charge relating to PC Zachary Marsden. That's why we are where we are today with that second trial that took place. And then just in recent weeks, the jury there unable again to reach verdicts with regard to the alleged assault on PC Zachary Marsden. So having taken all that into consideration, the fact that obviously considerable money has been spent on 2 criminal trials, the judge and Crown Prosecution Service have decided there will be no third trial. And so that is the news that we are just absorbing now at 1:45, midday.
And Mark, this is going to be a widespread reaction to this decision. Already our audience reacting, as you might expect, saying this is potentially an example of 2-tier justice. And I think it brings us into the wider context of what we were just talking about in the Nowak case, Henry Nowak's murder, and the fact that immediately in reaction to this incident, we did see people criticising the police. Senior figures, including politicians, came out to express concern about the policing actions there. And of course, when further footage was revealed and we saw more of a situation unfold and better understanding of what took place, some of those comments disappeared. But there was such a swift reaction to condemn the police after this incident appeared, perhaps because of the races of those involved in the case. But this breaking news now, there won't be a third trial over that section of that incident.
Those involved in policing will always tell you that often in an arrest phase, it can look very violent indeed, because it's a violent confrontation. If someone is not complying, is not giving you their hands in order for you to handcuff them, is resisting, then you've got to pressure them into doing that. And sometimes that requires a level of violence, a kick to the arm, kick to the side, even it kicks to the head. Whatever the officer can justify at the end of the day, when he's facing a violent individual who is being non-compliant and he is concerned at the end of the day. All I will say is the jury has sat through 2 trials now and has been unable to reach verdicts. However, having said that, people can see with their own eyes as well how the events unfolded there, the violence that was meted out against this officer. The brothers always claimed that they were responding to a level of violence themselves, and this was their defence mechanism that was kicking in. Clearly, a jury just not able to decide whether they were guilty or not.
Well, Mark White, thank you very much for that update. Well, we can cross live now to Liverpool Crown Court, where our national reporter Sophie Reaper joins us. Sophie, bring us up to date.
Well, as you've just been hearing from Mark White, that news has just broken here this morning at Liverpool Crown Court that the Crown Prosecution Service will not seek a further retrial for the assault charge faced by brothers Mohammed Amars and Mohammed Ahmad. Speaking on behalf of the prosecution, Mr Greenie KC said the Crown's assessment is that whilst count 2 is serious, it cannot be said it is of serious gravity, and therefore the Crown has decided it cannot lawfully seek a second retrial in case of either brother. Now, the decision was then approved by His Honour Judge Flewitt, and he ordered that not guilty verdicts should therefore be recorded for both brothers on that particular charge. And what this means now is several things. For the younger of the 2 brothers, Mohammed Amars, of course, last year he was found guilty on 3 separate assault charges. So he has been remanded in custody and he will remain there until his sentencing for those 3 separate charges, which has now been listed for the 26th of June. However, for his brother Mohammed Ahmad, he has now not been found guilty on anything, and therefore the judge has told him for him it is over and he is free, and we're expecting him to walk through these doors of Liverpool Crown Court any moment now.
We expect,
but as I say, people can look at the footage; they can see for themselves the level of violence. Officer.
Or indeed the defendants, as they were, going to come out and speak. Do you expect that?
Can you just say that again? Sorry, that just got all confused.
Is anyone expected to come out and speak, Sophie? Oh, there's the microphones behind you. With the defendants be speaking?
Yes. We're not sure on the defendant yet. However, we do know that their representative, their solicitor, Mr Anwar, is expected to speak here outside. He's told us perhaps that will be around 12:30, so we will try and bring you that here.
That'll be a major moment. OK, Sophie Reaper from Liverpool Crown Court, thank you for that update. I remember when this case and this incident broke, Miriam, that Amir Anwar actually held a press conference. That was in August 2024 in reaction to this incident, and essentially tried to explain the case as to why those men had acted as they had. But you can imagine there's going to be major disappointment from within Greater Manchester Police about this trial collapsing now, that there won't be a retrial in this case. The footage you're playing on your screens, that was the incident in 2024, in July of that year, when those men were arrested and that violent altercation occurred. It led to widespread political reaction as well. People were very swift, Miriam, to condemn the police before they saw more of the footage about this case. But as it developed, it was perhaps quite understandable why charges were laid as they were.
Absolutely. Do you think, Charlie, there is a problem with instant mobile phone footage of incidences like this? Do you think the police will start to fear acting in the way they've been trained to act, acting instinctively, perhaps violently sometimes if necessary, because they're so worried about the footage being shared and it being misinterpreted?
Well, clearly, police officers in this case are going to be severely disappointed that this element of the prosecution hasn't been able to be achieved. And, we spoke to a man called Rick Pryor from the Met Police Federation. He actually was sacked unlawfully because he told GB News that police officers were hesitating in some situations because they feared vexatious complaints. Well, I imagine Rick Pryor and other police representatives, those there who support and represent the rank and file, will have a similar reaction to this case. And how can you blame them? Because they're trying to do their job and they get slandered and attacked for doing it. And this sort of situation plays out. It'll be very interesting to hear, of course, what the lawyer for those men says, though. They might have a completely different perspective. We'll carry all of it here, of course, on GB News.
Indeed, and that may be up next in Good Afternoon Britain with Mark and Nana. They'll be on at noon, but thank you very much for watching this morning. You've been watching Britain's Newsroom.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Box Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Hello, good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update brought to you from the Met Office. Another warm day in the southeast, so it will be cooler than yesterday. Dry for many of us, but there is a risk of showers and some thunderstorms, particularly in the southeast later on today. A damp start for parts of northern Scotland, some rain across parts of Northern Ireland too, but it's across the south we could see some thunderstorms build up from the near continent later on this afternoon. Dry weather in between these areas for much of England and Wales, and it will still feel warm out there. Temperatures in the mid-20s for many areas across central and southern areas, in the high teens, low 20s further north than that. Through this evening, those showers across the southeast where they do form should push away, and then we look to the north where low pressure is still dominating. Quite a brisk westerly breeze affecting coastal areas and the high ground of Scotland. Some outbreaks of rain, relatively light through this evening. Should be a dry end to the day across Northern Ireland, Northern England, parts of Wales, central areas too. You'll see temperatures still in the mid-20s, so it will still feel quite warm out there to end this week of exceptional heat. And then overnight,